This episode of Gabba Gabba Hut Talks is brought to you by Hobo Wolfman Records. Hobo Wolfman Records is home to the fill-ins, Home for the Day, and the Body Bags. And in addition to music on Hobo Wolfman Records, at HoboWolfmanRecords.com you can also get t-shirts, hats, all kinds of other stuff, and it's basically like a distro. You can get records other than just what's on Hobo Wolfman Records. As a matter of fact, right now you can get a Street Clones record over there. Plus, you never know what Danny's going to put on there. He's got all kinds of crazy shit at HoboWolfmanRecords.com. You are now listening to the Gabba Gabba Hut Talks podcast, where we bring you conversations with people connected to the Carolinas underground music scene. Your host, Mike Phillips of Van Huskins. Hey there, and welcome to episode 34 of Gabba Gabba Hut Talks. This is the first new episode of 2021, and I'm looking forward to what this year brings for Gabba Gabba Huh. But as a little bit of an FYI, episodes may roll out a little bit slower, at least at the beginning of the year. I just have so many projects going on at this time, and last year I told myself I was going to slow down a little bit this year. Now I need a little bit of time for myself. Well, I'm still not finding the time for myself, thanks to an endless news cycle and all these other projects that I've picked up. But I'm not going to try to overdo it and put out an episode every week, at least for a little while. I know myself, and if I start lining up a bunch of interviews pretty quickly, I'll start putting the episodes out pretty quickly as well. However, do not expect an episode next week, but there will be something for you to listen to next week. I'll just leave it at that, and you can keep an eye on the Facebook page to find out more about that. There's also always a chance that I'll randomly put out a radio episode, and that's possible next week as well, but that's not what I'm talking about. Now, I don't want to talk too much up front. I do want to thank Regis Murphy for also being a big sponsor of this podcast. I don't really know if he wants me to promote his real estate business, but if you are looking for a house, especially like in the Lake Norman area, hit up Regis Murphy. You can find him on Facebook. He works for Helen Adams Realty. Just a solid dude, and thanks a lot, Regis. You're awesome. I also want to thank all my other patrons over on Patreon, the fill-ins, Bub Holla, Sunday Boxing. I'm trying to remember who else is a patron over there, but you guys are awesome. Thanks a lot. And speaking of the Patreon, this episode I recorded with Something Went Wrong has over an hour left that I really haven't sifted through yet, as well as a couple of other clips I've already cut out. What that means is that hopefully in the next few days, or at least the next week, there'll be about an hour's worth of extra stuff over on Patreon. If you want to help sponsor this podcast or just help support this podcast, go to patreon.com/GabbaGabbaHuh. That's it. I'm going to get right to this week's episode with Something Went Wrong.
Super nice guy, but...
I got a clapper for Christmas, and every time I go to pop a beer, it turns my lights on or off.
I always, the one that I struggle with is every time something on YouTube says Alexa, or we're talking about Alexa, that she has to hop in
the room. Yeah.
I never thought about it in your house. Does it trigger all the time just for...
Super annoying.
Look at that. Thank you, sir.
You're
welcome.
Why are you looking white?
But yeah, my daughter got me that, and I hooked some of my lights up to it, and I kind of like it, except for every now and when I open a beer, it turns my lights off.
I'm like, that's not what I intended.
And it's a Darth Vader clapper, too, so...
Wait, no, what is the difference between a regular clapper and a Darth Vader clapper?
Well, it's shaped like Darth Vader's head.
Okay.
And then when it turns on, he says something about... I forget exactly what he says, but he says something when it turns on and something when it turns off.
Okay.
When it turns off, he talks about the dark side. When it turns on, he says something about the...
Yeah.
I forget exactly what it is.
See,
I've heard it so many times, I just don't pay attention to it anymore.
But I like it's when the lights go off, he's going to talk about the dark side. That's appropriate.
The dark side.
So Dave, just kind of talk for a minute and make
right.
sure. I think I'm just going to have these, because I don't have them right up on you guys. I'm just going to have it cranked up.
Yeah, okay.
And I can tell, like, every time I do this, it's going to stop
like,
picking me up. So
it's like one of those times where you ask me to talk and I'm like...
Nothing to say, you?
Yeah, but then, like, anytime you want me to shut the fuck up, it's like...
Let's do this. Dave, tell us the entire story behind the last science fiction television show you watched. Go.
Fuck you.
What was the last science fiction television show you watched?
It would have been The Expanse. I've been sort of...
Problem solved.
Cracked on it. Just, part of it's because it feels so close. Like, a lot of the technology they use in the books and the shows is very... doesn't seem that much far removed from what we could do in the next 20 years.
They've based a lot of it in actual science, which makes it feel...
Like the only thing in the show that's really sort of out of... Really none of it's outside of human conceptuality. Like the main drives of the ships are just their fusion torches.
Alex doesn't watch television. Alex watches the washing machine go round, and we've had to tell him that the plot it's interesting, it's fascinating. But
they brought me here for the comic relief, and then they realized I'm not funny.
Well, we figured out early on that like you could sit on a bench with him and stare at a power transformer for 3 hours and say absolutely nothing. He'd be like, "Good talk, dude."
I'm an introvert, and I had a great time.
Yes.
Yep. Nothing wrong with that.
No.
Well, this will be the first interview I've done in a month, so I was thinking on the way over here, I'm like, I'm kind of out of practice for this, like, all around.
That's fine.
You do such an awesome job with everybody else that you've talked to. Like, I was amazed when we started to listen to all the stuff that you were doing, like how well put together it is, which is its own art form, but also you do a fantastic job at interviewing people and just letting that conversation flow. That in itself is a skill. So
yeah, that's the biggest thing I do is like, I say that like what I said a minute ago, but I go, I'm really never prepared when I do from my interviews anyway. I do a little bit of preparation. I usually have some questions to ask, but a lot of times it's like, let's just start talking and see where it goes. Because if I get you talking about what you did, how you got started in music, you're going to talk about it. Because, people like to talk about that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then everybody that lives around them is sick of hearing that stuff. So you get a new audience and it's like, oh, yes, let me talk about this.
Which is part of why I want them to talk more than me, because for the most part, people that encounter anybody that would be talking about our band, it's usually me.
You are sort of the face of the...
Yeah, how the fuck
Isn't it
did you
terrible?
Right, how the fuck did I become the face?
That's our face?
Right, this is your face?
Well, that was one of my questions. That was one of my questions for later was about the album cover and everything. So.
Oh, the album cover was because I came up with the idea, and I had several ideas, and that was the cleanest one.
Okay. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But so we'll talk about you being the face of the band too, if that's what you're talking about. So we'll talk about all that a little bit too.
Really.
But I am talking to the band Something Went Wrong, and I'm going to get you to introduce yourselves here in a second, and then we'll just kind of talk about how this band got started. I guess we can start wherever. Let's go ahead and start with Ziggy.
With the genesis, it needs to go with Ziggy for sure.
Yeah, I'm Ziggy. Guitar and some vocals and tambourine. It's mostly,
You just ruined the interview.
It's mostly tambourine.
Great job, Ziggy.
Alex, drums, and some backup vocals.
And I'm Dave. I pretend to play bass and pretend to do vocals, and somehow it comes out, I guess. I do a little bit of lead and backing where appropriate.
The artist formerly known as Evod.
Yes, exactly. Well, that was a relic of being on Facebook, trying not to be tracked by potential employers. And I'm kind of outside of the realm of giving a fuck about that at the moment, so I just, fuck it, here's my real name.
Yeah, same here. That's when I used to be M-I-K, Mick,
Yeah,
or it was
yeah.
Mike without an E. That was just my stupid attempt to like, actually it was a mistake the first time. And then it was my stupid attempt to just like fly under the radar.
I think my favorite thing to do with that is Brian Altman of the Flight Risks had not met me in person and only knew me as Evod Sue from Facebook. He's like, man, I thought you was a damn terrorist or something. It literally said that.
Yeah.
That's what I thought when I met you too. So
Yeah, everybody thinks that.
I'm in good company.
So I've known Ziggy longer than anybody because we played some shows together with your previous bands, Dysplacer.
Dysplacer, yeah.
And of course, we'll get around to talking about that too. But how did you get started? Like, I'll start with my standard question. Like, when you were a kid, what was it that drew you to music, and how early did you develop an interest in music? Whether it was like an interest in playing or just something that you enjoyed listening to.
For me, there's always like two component parts to this. So the first was just getting into music to begin with, because I didn't have exposure to punk when I first got involved in music. Yeah. Like so many other kids, I was too deep for my own good, and like writing poetry, and some kid that I went to school with played guitar and said you should come and sing, and I gave that a shot, and it was terrible. We were doing acoustic stuff, and a couple years went by. Some other kids were playing more in a rock band, and that had way more interest for me. Back in those days, we were doing U2 covers and REM and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But hanging out with some of those kids, the second part was. One of the kid who was the drummer showed me Decline of Western Civilization, and there's a few of those moments in people's lives, but I remember really succinctly how I had a light bulb moment of like, these are my people, this is what I want to do, this is what I just instantly connected with it, listening to, Black Flag and the Circle Jerks and that kind of stuff. And then I just started to try and chase and pursue anything that I could. And back in those days, even in Los Angeles, like, you couldn't go to the local record shop and find any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Like one record shop in Hollywood that I'd have to, I could only get down there so often. And I had no idea there's all these 7 inches and stuff. And I had no idea what I was looking at. But that was it kind of for me. So the one was just, learning to be in a band, but then kind of discovering punk rock, and that was how.
Yeah, so you're originally from LA?
Chicago originally, but I grew up in Los Angeles most of my life. Okay. Spent there.
Yeah, that should be pretty interesting, I would guess. When you first got into music, though, like your first attraction to music, what were you listening to at the time?
My father was a big Beatles fan.
Okay.
So I think there was a lot of that growing up. I know there was a lot of Led Zeppelin in my house growing up, and I still listen to that stuff constantly. Both of my parents were big music fans. Mm. My father and my stepfather both played guitar, and my father played in a bunch of bands when he was young back in Chicago in the 70s.
Okay.
So again, there was a lot of influence there, but I had to learn to play guitar myself. I had to discover that for myself. There was no, I didn't take music lessons growing up or anything like that. Yeah.
Alex, how did you get interested in music as a kid? And then you could talk about maybe when you started playing an instrument.
Yeah. Thinking back, I had friends I played hockey with, and one of them was kind of like a guitar virtuoso at the time. We were back 11 years old.
Yeah.
And he wanted to start a band, and he's like, hey, you should play the drums. I was like, all right. Start playing the drums, and he was big into Hendrix and the Ventures, surf music and just old rock. And it's basically what we started with, was like surf music covers and Hendrix covers.
Yeah.
And, doing my best to emulate Mitch Mitchell, and, kind of went from there. In 1993, we got really into Nirvana. Mm-hmm. And then Nevermind hit, and it wasn't cool anymore.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when we went the punk route. Yeah. And started playing kind of punk with hardcore breakdowns, and played with them for a long time back in Boston. That's where I grew up. And I kind of took a break right after our biggest show, back in, it was probably 2004. We were together for like 13 years playing, same 3 guys. And then, I took a break, played with a couple of indie bands. And then moved down here in December 2014, and kind of had the itch at that point. I wanted to play again. Had been a while, and put the ad on Craigslist, and
that was when the magic happened.
They answered it.
Yep.
Yeah. No, you answered.
Did I answer yours?
Us.
Is that what it was?
I think so.
Yeah, right. That's exactly.
I know there was an ad, and I was looking through. I must have been looking through and saw it, and I would just, put punk in and see what happens.
Yeah.
You showed up with a set of electric drums, and I was like, fucking serious?
That was the greatest. I had this really shitty Alesis kit that I could carry in with one hand and a small little amp. And that was when you guys you had the space up at Noda Studios. So it was like a 45-minute schlep for me to go try and see what even happens. And I set it up, and they start, and I'm like, all right, you can't even hear the damn thing. Yeah. You could hear maybe the cranked bass drum just farting in the the woofer. And I think we played the first song, whatever it was.
Probably Turn of Events.
Yeah, it might have been, and I was like, well, I don't even think they could hear me. And they're both, I look up, and they're both like, grinning ear to ear. I was like, well, it couldn't have been that bad.
And I know this is maybe a deviation into the beginnings of the band, but when Alex came in within 30 seconds, I knew he's the best drummer that I had ever played with, and he immediately had an ear for the rhythms and the kind of stuff that we were doing. Like, it was just instantly, there's a connection there.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was like, okay, well, how, what do I have to say to keep you coming back?
They haven't stopped, really.
No, there was a lot of ass kissing for that first year, though.
Held the brass ring in your hands. Claim to be the only one who really understands. The God who walks among children, floating down from heaven to save us from our sin. And now it seems you lost it all. They say right goes before the fall.
much it for my backstory.
Okay, we'll talk. We'll talk more about those bands that you played in, like
Okay.
in Boston in a little bit too. Because I like to try to cover all that stuff.
Sure.
But I knew that you weren't from here from just the accent. I was like,
Is it that obvious?
so you answered that question for me.
Sure.
I guess Dave, let's talk about you, and then we'll talk
All
more
right.
about the beginnings of the band. And
Mine is a little less interesting, I think. My parents had 2 albums that they had on repeat for car trips when I was a kid. And it was the fucking Urban Cowboys soundtrack. And they had a Little River Band's best hits. So I got to hear a lot of that. And that was a lot of what I got just bombarded with as a kid. Fuck, do I have to hear that again? Dad really loved country at the time, which again was just kind of But I watched him play a lot of guitar when I was a kid. He played very good finger picker, played a lot of John Denver stuff. Never wrote anything of his own. But that sort of planted the seed, I guess. And the thing that really got me started, and people laugh, but it's true, was fucking Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. River Bottom Nightmare Band, which I still say, I've posted it on Facebook. Fucking Frank Oz is the father of death metal vocals. I mean, they call him Cookie Monster vocals, and for a while he voiced Cookie Monster. I mean, come on, it's there. But I saw that, and I was like, damn, I want to do that. And then it went a while. I didn't really do anything musically until 4th grade. I picked up a viola and started taking viola lessons in school. I was in orchestra.
Okay, yeah.
And I did that until 6th grade, and I was like, this is boring. I want to try something else. Picked up cello. And I really liked cello. Really couldn't stand my orchestra teacher, but I really liked cello.
Yeah.
And it was about that time, like my first album I ever bought was fucking Michael Jackson's Thriller. I mean, come on, who didn't have that one? But then I went along this process. It's like, okay, Def Leppard's cool. I'm going to start listening to that. That's really cool. I guess it was about the time that Hysteria came out. Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction came out. I was like, whoa, that's just like another level. And then about the time I got interested in Metallica was about the time I decided to pick up a bass. And literally I put in a cassette tape of Kill 'Em All and picked up my dad's Rickenbacker, which was hilarious because I'm sitting here learning how to play on a 4001, a 1981 4001, which, you know, people fall all over those damn things. And I had no idea. I was like, this is just dad's bass that he got in a pawn shop. Fuck it. And it makes it sound like I'm trying to sound more impressive than I am when I say that. I was not playing Cliff Burton's riffs. I was basically following the root note of the songs and figuring out how to do staccato picking and shit that they were doing at the time. But I just went from there. You know, I really didn't get into punk until later. That's the funny thing. I was more into like Slayer and Sepultura and shit like that. And then college was when people started asking me, hey, teach me how to play this Dead Kennedys song. And I had been exposed to the Misfits prior to that. I'm like, no. Like my first exposure to the Misfits, I actually didn't like it. I thought it was too simplistic. And then when somebody was like, okay, I want you to listen to this Dead Kennedys song, figure it out, and teach me how to play it. At the time I played guitar. And I was like, okay, there's something to this. This is interesting. There's a lot more complexity to this. And the rest of it just kind of grew on me. So I kind of had a little bit of exposure to that too. But I bounced back and forth between guitar and bass, and I still do a little bit. But bass is probably my primary instrument. Yeah. And came by it honestly, I guess. Yeah. Dad played in cover bands. Around, I lived in Wilmington at the time. And even back then, you could make a killer income with cover bands. Like he would pay for Christmas and we would get these gifts that we had never gotten before and we were always told they were too expensive because he was going out and playing bars with a cover band. So I mean, Stones covers and shit like that, people ate it up back then. So
that's my musical retirement plan is in 10 years I'm just gonna be like, it's time to play in a cover band, make a little bit extra money on the weekends.
Well,
one of those pieces that I always love about your origin in music is that, and I'll never get the name right, but the Muppet Band.
Yeah, the Nightmare.
And the first time you mentioned that to me, you know, I had an idea in my head, but then we actually sit down and listen to it. So for anybody that's listening, like if you haven't heard that, again, what's the name again?
It's called The Nightmare. From Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas.
If you haven't listened to it, like when he says that's really where the birth of death metal comes from, like he's serious about that. If you listen to it, it really does. It's really heavy.
Well, that was a funny moment. Wasn't that right after that surgery you had?
Yeah, I think
he was in an apartment over near where I lived, and I had picked him up and brought him back. Yeah. And he's like, I want you to see where my roots come from. And he's showing me fucking, Decline of Western Civilization. I'm like, okay, that's cool. We watched that for a little bit. I was like, okay, let me show you where I came from. And I turn on Emmett Otter. He's like, the fuck is this? And he's like still like pretty much half lit from the meds at the dentist's office watching this. Like, who the fuck have I gotten in a band with? Watching this. But it that really was the moment where I said, I want to do that. I want to be like the fucking bear and the snake and shit. And the weasel.
I have to take that like even a step further and say, like, to me, one of my biggest musical influences as a kid was just the Muppet Show in general.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they had all kinds of great musical guests on there. And even beyond the musical guests, like every skit had a song, or not everyone, but most of them had a song or something. And so as a kid, I just loved music, and whether it was, the stuff they played on Sesame Street or whatever. When I graduated to the Muppet Show, that was when I first got introduced to Alice Cooper and, Linda Ronstadt was probably on there. I'm trying to remember who else was on there. But there's a lot of good artists on there.
Mark Hamill.
Elton John.
Yep. I mean, they had all kinds of people on there. Yeah. So it was the Muppets in general was a big influence on me. So and I loved Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. So the River Bottom Nightmare Band was.
Yeah. But I did have a couple of bands, actually. I suppose I took a little too long to get around to that. I was in a band called Entropy in high school with just a couple buddies of mine. We never really did much. We opened for Wicked Ways a couple times, if you remember who they were.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I went off to college at App State, and I was in 2.5 bands, I'll say. The first one was this weird-ass band called Hot Soup that I could go on forever about, but I won't. It was just a very strange, like, half original, half cover band that I wound up leaving. There was a band I was in. We called it Sloth to start with. They changed it to Haas. And again, it was another one of these mixed bands where everybody had different inputs and all that. They actually went on to be 800 Octane. They put out like 6 or some albums. They were out in Oregon for a while. So I missed the boat on that one. And then I was in a metal band called Damage Done for a while.
Okay.
They have a song on iTunes that I did not get writing credit for that I did write, but that's all water under the bridge. And then I just quit for a long ass time. I took a break for a good 15 years because I had so many personality clashes with that band. It was like a bad marriage. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of picked up playing again. I bought a new guitar, I bought a new bass. I got in a Nirvana cover band, which I get no end of grief for.
Refuses to play any Nirvana now.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, no, I mean, there was something that happened during that time that really stuck in my craw. And that was, we played at Amos's, the old Amos's, with Badfish. And I thought, it's a cover band thing, whatever. And I get in there, there were like 1,200, 1,500 people at that show. And I was fucking gobsmacked. I was like, what the hell? And on one hand, I was pretty thrilled. Like, I'd played one show with Hot Soup that big, and I think it was sort of a kids are bored at App State kind of thing. It wasn't like, hey, what are we going to do on a Friday night? Let's go see this. That was that big, and I'm like, man, this is great. There are all these people here. And my first thought was, they're here to see Badfish, but then I started seeing kids walking in with their Nirvana shirts on. I was like, well, that's not necessarily true. Show went well, but the whole time I had it in the back of my head, this is not your fucking music. The biggest show pretty much you've ever played, you're regurgitating somebody else's shit.
Yeah.
So I moved, and that ended that band. I didn't do anything else till I came back here, and I was farting around with Greg Philbeck.
Okay, yeah.
And then Zig and I met, and it went from there.
Yeah. So the band you mentioned, Entropy, was that a band? Were you in Charlotte at that time?
Yeah, I was in Charlotte at the time.
Anybody else in the scene?
Shannon Swaggerty, if you know who he is. He sang for it. Everybody else has pretty much disappeared off the face of the map. I mean, they still live in the area. Like Mike Stevenson, he'd probably be horrified if I mentioned his name on the air. Guy is like no social media presence, completely paranoid. But he and I played guitar for that band. We had a guy, Wills Marshall, that played drums. I tried to do something else with a dude named Rob Roos. He's been in a couple bands. Very good drummer, but never just could get anything to materialize. And like I said, going to App State, was in a couple bands up there, and the way Damage Done came apart, it did damage, and I was done.
Yeah, so Damage Done, was that a band you were in while you were in Apple?
Yeah, it was App State. And it's funny, I was talking to Matt Daigle the other day. He was like, man, I know you and I have crossed paths before. What other bands were you in? I was going down the list, and he said, yeah, it was Damage Done. You guys played with us at Jeremiah's. I was like, nope, I was out of the band at that point. Because they did a lot of stuff around here at the time. I was done.
Yeah.
I was just done at that point.
Or a lot of people I talked to have had a period of time where they stepped away from it for a little bit. And a lot of times it's just family. You start a family, and that becomes more important. But everybody's got a reason for doing it. And sometimes it is just that bad experience.
Well, this was the Clash.
I've
Like,
had
I
a
mean,
couple, yeah.
I was trying to get a job in Boone because I'd actually quit school to focus on that band full time. Like, dumb decision number one in my life was to quit school to work on a band. And I don't know how much you know about living in Boone, but it's like you're either hippie mafia and can get a nice job somewhere with your dreadlocks and patchouli, or you're probably working fast food.
Yeah.
Which is what I wound up doing. I mean, I don't know if you've tried to live on that shit. That was like the poorest I've ever been. I wouldn't ask my parents for money. So that, like, the lead guitar player had a pretty good job, and he would always fuck with me about not having money. I'm like, dude, I've tried. I've looked around for jobs. So finally, he tells me, why don't you apply to the country club that I work at? There's a dishwasher job there for like $7 an hour. I was like, cool, I'm making $4.50 right now.
Yeah.
This is back in 94, 95. That was pretty great for me. So I go and apply, and I didn't hear anything about it for a while. And I was pretty bummed about it. And then he finally, like, everybody got in a kind of a pissing match one night, and he goes, you know why you didn't get that job? Because I told him not to hire you. I was like, what? You told me to apply? So I was just like, okay, fuck off. I left. And I've sort of mended those fences since then. I have no ill will, but that was pretty much it for me. I was like, if you're going to set me up and then torpedo me, that's some underhanded shitty stuff. So I was just like, I don't want to deal with that from anybody. I had this guy, like, I tried to get something started back when I got back to Charlotte, and I got in touch with this guy from Creative Loafing's personal ads. Guy's name was Liam. I don't remember his last name, but he was absolutely convinced he was going to be the next big thing in rap metal. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get that dude to quit calling me with lyrics. And I was like, dude, your shit doesn't work. Quit calling me. It was so, like, the whole thing, like a string of bad shit just turned me off that I probably pick up an instrument for 15 years.
In your 13 years, did you ever have a gap, or that was just you played straight through?
Oh, no, I definitely did, yeah. When I left the first band, Confront.
Yeah, I was going to ask. It was your first band, you said was Confront, was the name of the band?
Yeah, it had a couple of iterations as we started with the Hendrix and Ventures stuff. We were called Cellar Stairs at the time. Then we got into Nirvana, and we changed our name to Whole Shot. And then when we kind of got out of that and started doing our own punk, hardcore stuff, that's when we became Confront. Mm-hmm. And we played as Confront for, I don't know, 8, 9 years, something like that.
Yeah, you play a lot of shows up
we did, yeah. It's got to be somewhere near 200 shows.
Oh, yeah.
And in Boston scene, it's just different. It was, back then, it was big. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how it is now, but compared to here, it was just a very big scene. And we were doing very well there. We were very well received, played big shows, played the big venues. But just for me, it stopped being fun. Even though I was friends with the guys in the band, when it came to the band and to shows, it wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah.
They were so serious. Well, maybe not they. The guitarist and main songwriter, he was so serious about it that you'd end a show and he would just shit on you. And it's like, but I didn't screw up. I was like, you literally wrote your own lyrics and I heard you mess them up. But I'm the one getting shit on. And I just couldn't take it anymore. And I think I took at least 2 years off after that. And then just kind of same thing, browsing ads online, replied to a couple of guys that were near me at the time with an indie band, and I didn't know much about it. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to get back behind a drum set. Yeah. And, I met with them. They were cool guys. Music wasn't necessarily for me. It was very slow tempo. Mm-hmm. And even on the couple of songs that I rocked up, I could tell that they weren't necessarily happy with where it went. Not that I made it faster, I just made it heavier. Yeah. And I played with them for probably a year and a half, and I think it just ran its course because they wanted to go in a different direction than I could go with them. Mm-hmm.
What was the name of that band?
You gave us that CD when you came to the demo.
It'll probably come to me in a little bit. Okay. I can't recall it right now, to be honest. That was like 8 years ago now. Great guys and good musicians. Just, it was not the right music for me. And I just wanted to get back into what I feel comfortable with and what I enjoy.
It's funny how your experiences parallel mine, because it was the same thing for me. I could never find people that were willing to play stuff that was heavy enough, because I ended up at an early age, I fell in with all these guys that were, just these amazing guitar players and amazing, instrumentalists. And they all wanted to do things based on their musical complexity rather than, for me, about like feel or groove or energy, or, for me, guitar is a bit of a weapon. I want to release some anger and energy when I go up and play. And that was too juvenile for everybody else that I knew at the time. So I struggled for years to find people that no, I want to play like faster and harder.
So is that one of the dudes that wound up looking embarrassed when he was playing with Wes Scantlin with the terrible Nirvana cover that you pointed to that guy?
Yeah. So that's my buddy Matt, who's an amazing musician and a super, super nice guy. No, I mean, Matt wasn't one of the people that kind of resisted, I think, the kind of stuff that I wanted to do. But we just ended up in these bands that, people wanted to do stuff that was a lot more melodic. And I remember sitting down, I had a drummer that I played with who the focus was, how complex could you make the time signature for the drums, and how many times could you change it over the course of the song? And so it wasn't about again, making something, serving the song. It was just about showing off from a musicality standpoint. And they were all so good. And I mean, if you have seen me play guitar, I mean, I'm okay at what I do for this, but I'm not, I'm not this amazing, soloist or anything. Yeah. And so I really struggled. It was one of the reasons why I started to learn to play guitar, was because I started off singing and I didn't know what to do with my hands. Felt uncomfortable just standing there with a microphone. Oh yeah. But yeah, I mean, as I played more and more, that was always the struggle for me, was to find people that were willing to play, again, hard and fast and do the kind of stuff I wanted to do. So it took getting to this spot with these guys to really achieve that finally for me. And I've, of all the things I've done in my whole life, I'm more proud of this, and I enjoy this more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Now, Alex, I do want to ask you one more question about your time in Boston. Well, during that time, I guess that was probably before Dropkick Murphys got big, right? Were they
yes and
around
no.
the scene?
They were, the Boss Tones and Dropkicks. Dropkicks were getting bigger. In fact, I left the band right before we were playing the show where we were actually opening up for the Dropkicks on their hometown throwdown show. They do like a 1 week long set of shows in Boston, and they have bands, line up for them ahead of time. And we were scheduled to be one of them, and the show before it was a great show, and just afterwards was so miserable. I was like, fuck this, I'm done. Yeah. If that was a show that I thought was great, and it's this bad afterwards, I don't want to play the next one and see what that's like. That's just even more pressure I don't need. I'm here to have fun. Yeah. If it's not fun anymore, why am I here?
Exactly, yeah.
So I left right before we played with them. You brought them up, but... Yeah. Yeah.
I've always been curious what it'd be like to play in a scene with a band that got that big. Because, the biggest we got around here is probably Anti-Scene. Yeah. And, they're not big on that level.
Mm-hmm. The scene used to be bigger here, though, years ago. I mean, the world has changed around us, obviously, but I've been in Charlotte for, I think this is coming up on year 11 now. But from everybody that I've talked to that's been here, as a native to here, what I hear is that going back 15, 20 years, this scene was much bigger here.
Yeah, it was pretty good for a little while. And then I always say, like, the years that I was out of it, and I know that everybody's like this, well, when I wasn't playing music, there was nothing going on. Mm-hmm. I found out there really wasn't a whole lot going on. I mean, there were bands. There were some good bands. There weren't a whole lot of people going out to shows. There weren't a whole lot of great bands. And it was just a handful of good bands. But it's coming back around. And I think it's better now than it's ever been as long as I've been in it. Now, there might not be as many people coming out to shows right now. But the talent is it's way beyond what it ever was.
I kind of wonder if some of that has to do with the lull for a while. And, like, people just kind of lost interest because there wasn't a lot of exciting stuff going on. Now it's like... Yeah, I know you're trying to get that out there, and we all appreciate it. Like, look, there's a lot of really cool, exciting shit going on in our scene not right now because of the fucking plague.
Nothing was happening right now.
But, up till that point, it was pretty fucking exciting, some of the stuff going on. And
having grown up in LA, and, the scene when I was growing up in LA was really fragmented. And then I started going out to see shows before Green Day hit. And when Green Day hit, the whole scene in Los Angeles totally changed. And there was another one of the places where I walked away from music for a while because all of a sudden it was, these guys showing up to shows that knew nothing about the music, and they just came to fight, basically, which wasn't my scene at all. But everything was really fragmented. We used to kind of joke about the fact that you'd go into a club in Los Angeles, and no one would be up front. Everyone would be standing in the back with their arms folded, and there was this kind of, you're not really impressing me sort of mentality that was going around. Mm-hmm. So when I moved to Charlotte, and I took a gap in a couple of years, and I came back out here, and I started to play, but I was like floored. I remember going to the Milestone for the first time, and just seeing like everybody really seemed to embrace each other. And then the other thing for me was that the scene here was so not fragmented. And I don't know if that's because it's got smaller or if it was always this way. But like, Dysplacer, we would go and there'd be a metal band and there'd be, you guys as a punk band. And like everybody was gelling and everybody's getting along and everybody's enjoying all of the music and supporting each other. And for me, that was like such a breath of fresh air. Like Los Angeles years ago, it wasn't like that at all.
That didn't happen in Boston either. The two did not meet.
Yeah.
It would just be a fight.
Yep.
It's kind of always been that way. Even back when we were playing in the mid 90s, we played with metal bands at that time. Pure Hate, Deviant, just to name a couple of them. But I think, and I've said this before, but how there was that lull and then it came back. I look around and I see a lot of the same people that were playing back then. Yeah. And the thing is that we've all been through the family thing. We've all had to step away from it a little bit. And I think that when we came back, by the time you get to be our age, you've got a new appreciation for all kinds of different kinds of music.
Sure. Yeah.
And not that you don't when you're younger, but you really become a little bit more filled out with your musical taste. Mm-hmm. And you just get better. And I think a lot of people, when they take that break from it and come back, I know I did. When I first came back, I was trying to play everything kind of simple because I didn't want to just rehash everything I did previously. I didn't want Van Huskins to sound like the Accidents. So I just started playing kind of simple and just I'm going to do what serves the song. And what served the song turned into me doing a little bit more with it.
Right.
And I've learned that I'm a hell of a better musician now than I was back then.
Sure.
Which is funny. We were listening the other night, and I think I pegged one of your major bass influences that if it's not intentional, it's a little uncanny. You sound a lot like Bad Religion's bass player when you're doing stuff. I was like, we were listening to what was the album?
Suffer.
Yeah, and I was like, man, that sounds a lot.
I have to go back and listen to that. I like Bad Religion, but I've never been a huge fan.
I was listening to it. I was like, this really reminds me of Mike's bass playing.
But when I was younger, I did listen to a lot more Bad Religion, and I'm sure I picked up some stuff from them.
I have to pay my own similar compliment. So I think the first time you and I met was the first time that I saw you guys play, and you guys were the first quote unquote punk band I saw when I got here in Charlotte. I think you were wearing a Queers t-shirt.
Yeah.
And so instantly for me, there was a recognition there. And then you guys got up on stage and it was like, oh, I have family here. I have, people that know what I know are here. And for me, that was awesome. And just was all the more reason why I wanted to keep coming out and playing. And,
I think the only difference between me back then and now is back then I was utterly obsessed with my riffage not sounding like anything else anybody had done. Like, this must sound different. It cannot be the same thing. And now it's like, okay, we're playing punk/hardcore. It is almost impossible for those chord progressions that we're stringing together to not have been done in some fashion.
3 or 4 chords? Yes.
So unless it precisely mimics somebody else's stuff, it's like I don't give a shit anymore.
Well, there's even times where I don't care about that so much. Like we'll play a song and I'll go, man, that's the chord progression from blah blah blah. We're using it anyway. Yeah. Or like the time that Eric was like, write a bass line that sounds kind of like the Go-Go's. I was like, I'll do you one better. I'll play that bass line in the song. So I played the bass line, and it fit. And I'm like, if anybody notices, I'm fine with it because we're kind of paying tribute. Mm-hmm. But it's all been done before.
Oh, it has. I mean, what gets really funny is we were sitting in here, I guess it was a couple months back, and because we have very different backgrounds musically and very different influences coming in. There's plenty of crossover, but there's a lot of stuff that just, we're in different worlds with that. Zig's like, I got this riff I came up with, and he starts playing it. I was like, Zig, that is a Megadeth riff. And he's like, I don't listen to them. I was like, I know you don't listen to them. He's like, but that is literally note for note a Megadeth riff. And I know you did it completely by accident, but there it is. And it was bizarre and that by itself told me right there. It's like you can avoid that all you want to. Just make it cool and make it your own. Yeah. It doesn't matter otherwise.
And then every now and then you do come across one where you're like, oh no, we have to get rid of that because it sounds so much like something. Or, we have to change it a little bit. We have to make this our own.
I have one like that I left alone and these guys didn't recognize it and I have to come clean. I recognized it. And it's not one that we're playing right now because I never came up with lyrics for it. It's one that I'm planning on doing lyrics for the second album, but
there's a sale on sale.
Yeah, the second half of the chorus.
Okay.
The actual intervals of the chord progression are almost straight out of an older Amon Amarth song. But it's like translated into more of a punky thing. And the way the rhythms go and the way the drums go with it, unless you're really looking for it, you probably wouldn't catch it.
Yeah.
But it's there. And I was like, just not going to say anything, see how far we can go with this. But yeah, I'm going to put lyrics to it. It'll go on the second album, and I have zero interest in changing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter.
Well, I'll kind of add this while we're sort of on this subject a little bit, and then I do want to ask you a little bit more about being in LA. But I think one of the reasons why the Charlotte scene is like that, and why we do mix the genres so much, and I will say there's still some splintering in the scene. There's still like there's a faction of the metal scene that doesn't cross over with our scene.
Very definitely.
But
don't get me started.
And I don't even want to get into that. But but there are bands like Death of August that plays with us, and when we played with Deviant and stuff. But I'll go and say that I think the reason that works out so well around here is because the punk bands around here aren't just punk bands. I mean, they're pretty. You guys have a lot of metal in your music. Van Huskins has metal influences. Trash Room has metal influences. We've all got some metal influences, so that's why I think it works so well in this area, and why we're all so open to doing that.
Charlotte is responsible for the metal influences that I started to pick up because of the shows that we went to. Playing in Dysplacer, Jared Starnes, a good friend of mine, really started to expose me to a lot of doom metal and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when I started to hear that I got really hooked on. And Dysplacer was an interesting combination of blending that stuff with my punk background, because I can never get out of the punk thing. But to begin to discover that was really cool. But that was absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, because of part of the scene here, I've brought more metal into my genre. And some of the stuff we're doing recently, again, kind of getting into like almost a thrash thing, would never have happened if I would have spent all these years in Los Angeles. That happened because of here.
So let's talk a little bit more about you being in Los Angeles. So I guess you said you grew up there.
Yeah.
So you grew up there during the quote unquote, and I hate the term, hair metal scene. But you probably weren't involved in that, or
I
were
remember,
you aware of it?
Yeah, very much so. I remember even as a kid, going back. I moved to Los Angeles when I was, I think, 10 years old. Which is about the time, I think, when you start to realize that, like, oh, there's this music thing, and people play music for a living, there's bands, and there's these different... and even then, I remember... and no offense, because there's some great musicians out there and some great people, but, like, I saw the big teased hair and the makeup and, like, the, Poison and the Dawkins or whatever, and it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
There was the campiness and the glam and everything else, it never... Yeah, I thought it's not real. It's all for show. And I'm a person, I really like things to come from the heart. I like things to be raw and for there to be an energy there. I don't want things that are really, made up and put on for show.
Yeah.
There's a difference between putting on a show and giving people a good time, but then, that kind of over the top thing that happens. So, things that were big at the time, U2 and REM, and again, a lot of that stuff. And I didn't have any particular genre. I was just sort of exploring all kinds of different kinds of music. And again, there was all that stuff that you grow up on that you really like. The kids that I was playing with were definitely into that. The Cure, I remember covering Love Cats, I think was the name of the song, and then 10:15 and some other stuff. Covering some Beatles songs. My first memory of looking down in the audience and seeing people sing words along with me was playing a high school talent show at Burbank High School. And we did Revolution by the Beatles.
Okay.
And so there's all these parents down in the audience, and I was 16 years old, I think. But I'm looking down the audience, and all these parents are singing along with me. I remember we're the last band to play the talent show, so we walked off stage, and all the parents are leaving out into the main lobby. And as I went off stage and came out in the lobby where all the parents were, it was a big high school, there's a couple thousand people there. there were like 30 parents that all had their arms around each other in a big circle, and they were all singing Revolution at the top of their lungs. And I remember thinking, like, you feel powerful for a second. You're like, wow, I did that, even though it's not my music. Like, and I was fully conscious of that. It was like it was what we did up there that made that happen, and that had a big draw for me. So as a little time went on, I started to, again, I get exposed to punk rock, and I started to try to pursue that, but the guys that I was playing with, that wasn't what they wanted. And again, so I really kind of, I kind of struggled. It was a couple of years, and again, before Green Day got big. But I remember somehow we got a hold copy of Nirvana's Bleach before Nevermind came out, and we were all kind of hooked on that. And then I started to discover Screeching Weasel and Queers and that kind of stuff. And I just fully got hooked into that kind of 3-chord pop punk kind of, So I started a band with a couple friends of mine. I was working in a record shop in North Hollywood at the time. And I was trying to come up with the most obnoxious, snotty punk rock name that I could come up with. And at the time, Full House was a big deal, and the record shop rented videotapes. And so Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen had like a series of videotapes.
Oh, yeah.
So we named ourselves Mary-Kate and Ashley, and we changed the spelling of it a little bit, and I'll get to this, why this is important in a second. But we changed the spelling, we hyphenated it, and they don't, or vice versa, I don't remember.
Yeah.
So we went out and started playing songs as Mary-Kate and Ashley. And that was like my first punk band. And again, I had kind of pulled that together with some folks. We played at this music shop, and the music shop took out, it was like a Battle of the Bands kind of thing. And the music shop took out a full-page ad in the local music paper. So we played the show, and there were like 5 people there. I mean, nobody cared who we were. And, it was like 2 weeks later, and my bass player who's the one who set up the show, got a letter from Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen's agent with a cease and desist saying that we needed to change the name. And to this day, illusions of grandeur, I guess. A couple years ago, I saw a Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen documentary, and I was compelled to watch just to see if there would be any mention of like, and, these punk guys actually named themselves after us at one point. Anyway,
I just see there was no mention, I guess.
No,
So angry at the end.
Nothing that I ever did in Los Angeles, really got big for any reason. I mean, we would play to audiences of, 20 or 30 people, but nothing extraordinary. The closest brush with anything I have anybody would know is at the time, Real Big Fish opened for us on some show, years and years and years before they turned into anything.
Yeah.
But that was another, I think, one of the struggles for me was the closest I was getting to the punk that I wanted was all of these ska bands started to emerge and the people that I knew around me, and I was never a ska fan. I still am not. I mean, it's not. I love Operation Avi, but like for the most part, that genre just doesn't do anything for me. So again, I had a lot of these near misses. Got to see a ton of great shows. There was a kid who lived in some of the neighborhoods we were in, and I won't remember his name or the name of his club, but his place started. He convinced his parents to let him have shows in the basement of a house that he lived in Chatsworth, Los Angeles, I think. And then that came to an end because the neighbors finally had enough of it after like 2 years or whatever. But that actually got reasonably famous from what I recall at the time. And then he rented out a garage in like a strip of garages at an auto body place, and there would be shows there. And that was kind of what I started to then find myself in a lot of these like sort of gutter punk shows. A bunch of friends of mine started to make friends with some of the gutter punks on Hollywood Boulevard, and we would go hang out with them. But again, as far, I got to see a lot of awesome stuff. I got to see some scary stuff.
Yeah.
But there was nothing that I did back in Los Angeles that was, noteworthy or particular. I mean, again, we played, but we never got to play in front of really big audiences, and no band ever stuck around long enough to be able to, do anything interesting or important with. So, it was, again, not until I moved here. I moved to Florida for a couple of years, and I didn't do any music in Florida. Florida seemed to have no music scene. At least that I could find. Well, now I know that there were bands like, for instance, Floor that were playing in Florida while I was there, and I loved later on, and I wish I would have known that stuff was going on because I would have gone and checked that out. But again, it wasn't until I got back here and I met up with Jared and started playing music that I kind of rediscovered, and the stuff I've done here has been more important than anything I ever did in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I lived in Florida for 4 years. I was in Gainesville, which you would think the city that Tom Petty came from. They're like there was this guitar shop that worked on my guitars, and one of their big claim to fame is the Allman Brothers used to go there and shop for guitars and shit. And, you'd think a town like that would have a music scene. Oh, hell no.
So even with Less Than Jake being from Gainesville, there wasn't really much of a scene
God,
there?
no, dude. I was trying, like, from the moment I hit the ground there, because I had left the Nirvana cover band, and that sort of put the taste in my mouth of, okay, I need to get back into this, and I really want to do originals. I want to get back into it seriously, write our own stuff, and actually get a decent band going. The only things I got were I happened across a cover band full of Alex Jones fanatics, and that was
wait, a cover band of Alex
cover
Jones?
band full of Alex Jones fanatics, and it was funny because they asked me about covers. Well, why don't you bring covers to the table? I was like, because I want to play originals. Let's write something. And
now I would think a band full of Alex Jones fanatics would be really good from a lyrical material
No.
standpoint.
No, they didn't have their
the UFO
own.
lizard people.
They didn't
whatever.
have their own, and it's funny because the drummer was like the most like heavily devoted, and he was kind of the ringleader. And he was what got me out of that band, my straw is he just went on this fucking rant behind the kid. He stopped playing, and it was a bunch of they kind of shit. They were trying to get us to move into the cities away from the wilderness, and he goes on this fucking tirade for like 15 minutes, and finally winds up with, and they worship Satan. And I was just like, hey, don't talk shit about Satan, motherfucker. And it brought him up short. He was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I was like, you didn't, but come on, man, will you shut the fuck up and can we play some music? And I just didn't want to come back. And after that, there was another band, and I don't give a shit about saying their name, it was another band called Vitreous. And they were these guys in Gainesville. The guitar player was very, very, very impressed with himself. Mm-hmm. And he was determined that he was going to basically start a Swedish melodic death metal uprising in Gainesville. And he was very impressed with himself. And I was going to come play bass and maybe sing for him. And I listened to their stuff. Like, yeah, I could do that. That sounds good to me. And he comes at me with, you don't have long hair like the rest of us, so we don't want you to even come try out. I'm like, really?
Oh, wow.
And I can't remember who it was, but I actually...
I had the opposite growing up, which is I had long hair playing in punk bands, and that back in those days, like that was verboten. So I used to get teased all the time for being a hippie because I'm in a punk band with my long hair. It was like,
well, the irony was I actually
never
ran
caught shit for it around here.
Again,
We didn't have it up in a mohawk.
No.
I ran across
tried once.
somebody. I ran across somebody that lives kind of in the Charlotte area, and I don't think he plays actively anymore. But I don't remember who it was. He played with somebody that had been around and played with some fairly big name acts metal wise, and these guys had opened for them and somebody else. And I had mentioned them on a Facebook post. We were talking about this kind of, what's the douchiest shit you've run into with music?
Yeah.
And he was like, you know what? This should make you feel better because they opened for us and they were the most like ass-kissing jackasses I've about ever seen in my life. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, they were complete douchebags. And I was like, well, that kind of makes me feel a little bit better that I dodged a bullet.
I'm listening to you talk, and it's something is occurring to me, which is, we all have the same experiences, and I'm sure you do too, that like growing up, there were so many people that I knew that just had severe egos, and there were examples for me. The very first band I played, one of the kids that was sort of the leader of that band just had this huge ego, and he wasn't that great of a musician. And my first band was one of the best experiences that I could have had because it told me right off the bat what was going to be important to me in every band I played in thereafter, mm-hmm. and how much I didn't want to deal with that. Mm-hmm. But I realize now, like, I can't think of anyone that we play with or around that has that kind of ego anymore. And I don't know, like, as if we get older, that the people with the egos, like, drop off and they can't hang anymore. They just, like, go write stuff in their basement.
I've heard some rumbles and rumors, but not anything that really gets talked about much.
Yeah,
Is it that
they're
thing
still
where
out
if you
there.
don't know them, it's you?
That could be.
It used to be me. I'll be honest.
Look around
Back in high school when I was playing for Entropy, I was a complete dick, and I'll be fairly honest. It was because I had been this fucking outcast, ostracized nerd before I picked up a guitar and a bass, and suddenly it's like I could fucking play. I'd be on the phone with a girl, and she'd be like, "What are you listening to?" I'd be like, "Me." She's like, "Really? That's you?" I was way better instrumentalist back then than I am now because I spent a lot more time on it.
Yeah,
and I did have a massive ego. Like Entropy basically ended because I didn't think Shannon was putting in enough effort, and this was not an indictment of Shannon. I don't want to turn this into a fuck Shannon moment on the
We love
podcast.
you, Shannon.
We love you, Shannon. Yeah, this is not dogging you, but that was how I felt at the time, that he wasn't putting enough into it, that he wasn't buying gear. Like there was too much effort to get him to practice and shit, and I just kind of got my ass on my shoulders about it. That's why, like, I called him out to a show, and I made mention. I was like, he was at Tommy's, and it's the first show he'd seen him. Well, the first time I'd seen him in 20 years. I was like, this is a man who knows what it's like to be locked in a room with my ego for a couple of hours, and he can tell you after watching me play music for 20 plus years that I have grown not one fucking bit in all this time. So yeah, that has already been smooth. But yeah, I had a massive ego back then, and now it's like that got undercut for me when I started playing again. Like, I had my nice hiatus. And, that's right around the time that YouTube really started cranking back up. And when you think you're a badass, and then it takes like a 30-second search on YouTube to find an 8-year-old that can run rings around you, it doesn't matter what instrument you play.
Exactly.
Your ego, in terms of technical skill, should honestly really just fly the fuck out the window. It doesn't matter anymore. Or it shouldn't. I mean, I know there are still people that cling to that. I just don't find it terribly important.
I spent so many years around really good musicians that it gave me a hang up about my ability to play guitar, and it took a number of years to realize that, like, I do my own thing, and I'm happy with what I do, and it doesn't matter. That's the wrong bar to hold. That's the wrong standard. What matters is that I enjoy the stuff that I play. I enjoy the stuff that we play and the stuff that we write. It's the kind of thing I want to listen to. I still like listening to our stuff. It doesn't get old for me. Yeah. It doesn't matter how technical of a guitar playing or knowing your scales or any of the rest of that shit. Do you enjoy what you do? That's it. That's
I still listen to it. And I'm like, hey, we did that.
Yeah, I still listen to stuff I recorded 30 years ago that I love. I mean, it's just it's good music. It's not very very technical. I mean, because we were really learning back then, but we wrote some good songs for us to not really know what we were doing.
It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be technical to be good. It doesn't need to be technical for people to enjoy it. And then I go and I think about the things that I enjoy the most. Most of my favorite music is really fucking simple.
Yeah, I mean, because Yngwie Malmsteen can play circles around most everybody else in the world, but his music is hard to listen to.
I have, no desire. No, that's not for me. Sure.
But, I can listen to the Ramones all day long.
Attempt at coming out of retirement in the middle of that hiatus. I guess it was about 2000, and I had I've told you about this song, even though it hasn't really materialized. We were going to do a Scottish themed joke punk band about basically herding and fucking sheep, and I'd written a song about that. And, yeah, I know, right? Me and the guy I was doing that with were drunk when we came up with the idea, but we decided to try to get together some musicians we knew and see if we could make this happen. And it was me and him. I was playing guitar, he was playing bass, and then we had another guitar player and a drummer, and they were both jazz musicians. And I will tell you for nothing that those guys were honestly some of the most technically talented musicians I've ever played with. But I'd start showing them my riffage, and the other guy could follow along with me pretty well. We were like, this is the song. And they were like, that's cool, but let's do something like this. And, all this like offbeat jazzy shit. And we were like, look, guys, you guys are in a complete other universe in terms of talent and technical skill than we are. But do you think it might be possible for you guys to dial it back a little bit and actually play a fucking song with us?
Yeah.
Instead of this wacky, super technical, improvised stuff, which, granted, that takes a massive amount of skill. It really does, but we were just like, we just want to play a song, man. Come on. That was one practice. And
I always appreciated the kids that I played with that had that technical capability and the ones that really understood the mathematics in music and all the rest of that stuff. And that is absolutely its own skill. But I never liked the way any of it sounded.
Yeah.
It sounded like, I used to call it spider goulash, which is just weird for the sake of being weird, not because there's actually an objective to it. It was just to prove off how crazy you could be, how well you understood music. And I just thought to myself, okay, that's great for you, but it's not what I want to listen to. It's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ran into that a lot with kids from Berkeley in Boston.
I can't imagine, yeah.
Just like, oh yeah, let's get together and play a song, and they're doing a solo for 14 minutes. And you're like, do you want me to play? Because nothing you're doing right now I can play along with. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not even in a time signature. I don't understand what's going on.
Which kind of translates, if you've listened to the album, we have a hard time telling each other no when somebody comes up with a riff. We're like, okay, well, let's just fucking do it. And like, the difference between something like Turn of Events and Flenser is like so far to the opposite ends of the spectrum, but it's still us. Mm-hmm. Second album's going to be a lot like that. I mean,
that was one of those things that I talked about. The first band I was in, the kid would say no all the time, and I thought to myself, this has just always been the way that I think. But don't say no. Try it. Try it and see. And the number of times I know that, like, in my life, I've thought to myself, my instinct is that something wouldn't work, and then we do, and especially like the way that Dave and I write. That, my instinct is like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. And then we do it or he plays it and I'm like, holy shit, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And now I know, like, I basically don't ever, I don't ever make a predisposition about what's going to work or not. Like, we're going to try it and see. And if it works, awesome. And if not, we'll do something else.
We do that all the time with Van Huskins. There's even a time where the song Farm or Not, at the end, the stuff I do on bass, I was doing a lot more of. And at one point, Ben's like, why don't you try to, like, just not play right here? Or, just keep it simple. And then, like, on the next time you play your extra stuff, I'm like, man, I don't know. It just don't work that way. It's not going to work. Mm-hmm. As soon as we tried, I was like, oh, no, that works. Yeah. So I've learned, like, not to shoot an idea down, even if it's taken away, what I felt like was taking away something of mine. Because in the end, it's like the restraint is just as good as the all the extra notes.
Rest assured, and this can be small consolation at some points, but those of us who know what the fuck you're doing, like other musicians, when we do watch you play and we see you go into a spot where you're really subdued, we know you're doing that on purpose. And we know that level of restraint, you have to have some control to do that too, because it's hard. I mean, I had trouble for years after playing so much like speedy thrash shit, not throwing extra notes into every fucking thing I did because that was just how I played. And with these guys, I actually stopped doing gallops with a lot of it. So I was like, okay, well, when we hear it on the recording, you don't hear it anyway. And second of all, I'm trying to sing while I'm doing this shit, and the gallops make it that much harder to do accurately. So I'll just, I'll keep it simple. I'll serve the song, and it lets me do both at once because I am not a natural at that. Like I did it in Damage Done, and I fucking hated it. Largely because there was a lot of pushing with that one. Like there was no, you're going to write lyrics for this now. We don't care if they suck. You're going to do it now. And it's like, there's a lot of pushing. And here it's like, okay, when you come up with something, it's cool.
Yeah.
When you've got Alex behind you doing, 350 beats a minute, it makes it really easy to, if you've got to find one of those spots where you've got to kind of give up the gallop for a second, like the way that Alex keeps a beat through the song just helps smooth all of that out. We get we've a number of compliments about how tight we are, but I think that's largely due to just the way that Alex kind of keeps things together and the beat that he keeps and how solidly he plays.
You got to have a good drummer to be able to do like the kind of things that you do where you change kind of on the dime sometimes from doing one thing to another. So definitely, you got to have a solid drummer for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You always know he's in the pocket. He gets this look on his face, and his head starts swaying.
His tongue sticks out.
I can't help the tongue thing.
He literally looks like a dog with his head out the window, just enjoying the run. It's like, okay, now we know Alex is having a good time.
There's nothing that I enjoy more than when we're down here practicing, and I intentionally speed up the tempo to the point that it's no longer comfortable for them, and they lose it.
I don't lose it though. That's the thing. You try to make me lose it, and I
No,
don't.
no, you
Vocally, I'll lose it.
It's usually so Alex will start
Something goes
doing
away.
it, and I'll see what's going on, and then we just at first.
Yeah, usually Ziggy looks over at me and we each smile because we know we're
Well,
going to set Dave off.
there's a specific song that he does this with, and it's Carousel.
Yep.
And the thing of it is with that song, that second verse hits, and the vocals are way busier at the same time that they're as forceful as anything else that I do. So we're talking about like pushing the edge of my lung power to do it normally anyway, and this asshole speeds it up to double speed. The bass playing's fine. I mean, like I said, I'm doing root notes and just kind of following along, but trying to sing it, it's like, and they're just dying laughing at me. And eventually, I'll just stop and look at him like, dick.
Now, we've done it so many times, like you've stopped letting it phase you when we do it now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We've actually gone the opposite direction recently, where now we're intentionally playing shit so slow.
Yeah, that's.
And we're like, yeah, actually, that wouldn't make a bad intro. Maybe we should do that sometime.
I think at least every one of our songs has had a 1/10 speed porno soundtrack version of it played at least once.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like to do that too.
Yeah.
And sometimes Ben does it, because you said you like to play stuff fast. Sometimes I'm like, Ben, you need to speed up, because he plays too slow sometimes. He's like, I'm just getting in the groove, man. Like, to speed it up. But, we have played intentionally just about all of our songs like at 1/10 speed, just to jam on for a little bit.
Going, yeah.
That's kind of been the great thing with these guys. All my past bands, it's kind of like you get together to create music, and they've come to you with an almost finished product, and they're like, here's what we want you to do. And it's like, okay, but, I'm not really inputting anything here. And with them, they're like, I've got a riff, and the final song sounds nothing like maybe what they brought to the table. Either I've changed some aspect of it, or we realize something doesn't work, we change it, maybe a riff from a different song gets brought in as the chorus or the bridge, and there's just, it's a lot of interaction and really feeling like we all have input.
Yeah.
Well, I learned that lesson from you off of Musings. That was actually the first song I wrote for this band. And I was expecting it to kind of be this blazing fast, fucking almost thrashy song going all the way through it. And then he did something while we were at practice one time. We just had the recorder going, and that's what he'll do. When the song's not cemented, he'll keep playing around with shit. And that thing that you hear in the last verse of Musings, where it just kind of slows down and it just... It's not as fast, but I guess the only way I can describe it sounds threatening. It's like the way it goes, and I was like, I will never tell him what the fuck to do on a song ever, because he did that with something that I wrote and made it sound 20 times better than anything that would have been in my head.
Well, this is a good place for me to say where I think that, when you've got a band that does that and does that well and gives everybody a little bit of creative input on it. Right. Like with Van Huskins, Eric pretty much brings the song to practice, but by the time we're done with it, it's something totally different.
Yeah.
Because we all take that input. And I think you guys, you're a three-piece band. There's a lot of great three-piece bands in Charlotte. And I honestly think that's a lot easier to do when you've got a three-piece band.
It is.
When you get a second guitarist in the room, I think a lot of times, a lot of that kind of goes out the window.
Yeah, I could see that.
So I think you guys sound a lot like Van Huskins in the songwriting process and the fun that you have in the room. And I just feel like that's a thing that comes much easier for three-piece bands.
Oh, very much so. We had the vocalist early on.
We spent damn near 3 years
an extra guitarist or a vocalist in the room.
Yeah, we had the vocalist in the room. We spent a long time trying to find a vocalist.
So
let's tread carefully here.
Well,
And if you say anything that you're like later you want to cut out, let me know.
I'm not going to say anything mean about anybody.
everything
Dave
that Alex
said.
says.
Anything I said, kill it.
Noted.
There's nothing left but Ziggy's talking.
So I've almost always done 3-piece bands, and part of that, if I'm honest, is because of my stripped down guitar playing. I just had a really hard time playing with other people. For many years, it wasn't an ego thing, but it had to be my band because other people couldn't. If somebody else brought a riff, I didn't know how to play along.
Yeah.
So if somebody else could play along to my stuff, that would work. But if I had to play somebody else's stuff, I was stuck. So for almost my whole life, it was 3-piece bands in one flavor or another. When we started this band, so I was playing in Dysplacer, which was also a 3-piece band. And I was getting to a spot, I think for both Jared and myself, it was just getting to a spot where it was becoming not fun. I think for Jared and I both for slightly different reasons.
Yeah.
So I had always had this, Dysplacer was a doom punk band. I don't know what you would call it.
Yes, well, that's pretty
sludge,
good,
probably.
But I always had this, again, sort of punk rock stuff in the background. So New Bomb Turks is one of my huge influences, and I had a ton of stuff. Yeah, God, love those guys. Had a ton of stuff kind of in that genre. Kind of building up in the queue that I'd be writing in the evenings. And so when it was clear that was kind of coming to an end, I wanted to start something up here. So I had met Dave, and Dave and I got along like two peas in a pod, and clearly had some, even though we come from really different musical backgrounds, it was clear that there was like a musical connection there, that we kind of spoke the same language and wrote really well together. Yeah. And then the question was finding a drummer, but I really wanted a front person, a vocalist. And my thought was this, at this stage in our lives, we're not going to sell 1 million records or become famous or anything like that. And I have no desire to pursue that. What I do want to do is I want to put on a good show. Yeah. And I think so often, in the world that we live in, what you see is often affects you more than what you hear, right? If we go out to the Milestone or someplace else, you'll go home, you'll hear music that you really like, but you'll go home the next day. If you saw something crazy the night before, you'll go home and you'll tell people about it the next day. You should have seen what I saw last night. Yeah. And for me, so often when you've got a dedicated front person that can really like go into the audience, so one of my big inspirations is Tiff Tantrum.
I was just thinking.
Yes, I mean, I brought these guys out I brought Alex out to see her, and we'll talk about some of the folks that we tried out as vocalists, but we brought a couple of people out to see her because she's that. She goes out in the audience and she makes them a part of the show, and you can see that connection, that bond. And then when you're playing, 200 beats a minute or whatever it is that we play, then you get some space to just focus on being able to keep all that together and keep it tight. So we really started off with the idea of being a 4-piece and having a dedicated vocalist. So I remember this conversation really well. But so Dave and I still had the rehearsal space. We were working with Steve Poe, and I shared a space up at Noda Studios. And Dysplacer had kind of become defunct at that point. And so Dave and I started playing, and then we were looking for a drummer. So I had a guy. I think I was just by myself when the first guy came.
Yeah, you were. Alex was the second guy.
Yeah, and so I had one guy up one night, and within 5 seconds I realized, like, nope, this isn't going to work. And then the second drummer I tried was Alex. And again, and now I'm sitting here next to my two best friends in the whole world, and I was just so fortunate. It was like that was serendipity that Alex walked in the room. Yeah. And then we musically bonded and we personally bonded, and like you couldn't ask for a better setup.
Right. And for the first year, we were like, okay, I don't care if we have to suck his dick, we're keeping him around. Yeah. So who would have known that Zig would just take care of that?
So I remember saying to Dave, I said, like, once it was clear after 2 or 3 rehearsals that Alex was going to stick around, I remember saying to Dave, so what's going to happen now is it's going to take us fucking forever to find a vocalist, because this was just way too easy. Like, Alex just landed on our lap, literally.
God.
And
so much innuendo.
And
like
it was just
don't.
So then we went on, and I think we counted a couple weeks ago. We sat and we kind of went and had like a little going back through old times, but it was about 12 or 15, like somewhere in that neighborhood. People that we auditioned,
I feel like it was more than that. But it was like a revolving door.
Yeah, there were some really nice people. There was one person that actually stuck around. We tried for a while. There were some people that were just dumpster fires, not only in terms of what they produced, but then some of the aftermath of this isn't going to work out.
There were people that brought out the absolute worst in me after one session of the room. Tony Yahoo.
And then the guy that came here with his wife,
girlfriend or wife. Yeah.
He had a list.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stories in there in and of themselves.
He had a list of what would make a successful band, and he wouldn't show it to Zig.
I guess I'll set up the story. So this is probably like the 13th or 14th person we've tried. So a guy messages me, sends me some video of him playing, which is not bad. He's playing guitar. He's not really singing. He tells me that he's a much better vocalist than he is a guitar player, and I'm thinking like, okay. And he names a couple bands that I think like, okay, this is all right. But we'll see. And we all were responsible for one or more people coming in. Yeah. Alex manned Craigslist for a while. Dave knew a couple people that kind of came in. And again, I don't want to malign everybody. Some folks came in and they were absolutely awesome, and we love them as people. It just wasn't a good musical fit. Yeah. So there's a whole different flavors of folks. Yeah,
we even had one
that's you if you're wondering, Amber.
And then ghosted us.
Yeah. We had one guy that came in twice, and I still think that we would have ended up different if that. Can't remember his name.
It wasn't Brandon,
it wasn't Brandon, no.
It started with a B, but that guy just fell off the edge of the planet.
Came in, and
he had the very hardcore, growly edge to him. Yeah. And would have changed our sound to some extent, but
it still would have been good. I mean, if he was here today, that would have really worked out well. We really wanted him to stick around, and we liked him, and so he came for 2 rehearsals and then ghosted us after that. We have no idea what happened to him. So anyway, we had a lot of folks come and go, and then we had somebody that was here for a long time, almost a year, but it became clear she wanted to change us, and really it became clear didn't really have a lot of desire to go in the direction that we all wanted to go, and kind of what
it's actually past that to me. I mean, honestly, it felt like not only did she not want, she had a different vision with what we were wanting to do. She had a very specific lack of respect and like for where we wanted to go. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, when somebody says to you, I kid you not, we did our last show with her at Tommy's. We walk in here like a week later, and it's at this point that she decides she's going to try to push us in a different direction. And she goes, if you guys are wanting to do an album, none of your songs are good enough, especially the song that Dave sings on.
And there's like 12 songs that we've been doing for, again, almost a year at this point. So there were some things that, like indicators that were leading up to that. So eventually we were like, okay, look, this just isn't.
Well, the other side of that was that I had tried to do it prior to that, and there were a couple of reasons why I decided I didn't want to. One was I wasn't having fun with it. The other one is Jackass kept isolating my vocals. The thing of it is nobody sounds good isolated. I don't give a shit who you are.
We've all done that.
Right. Tina Turner does not sound good isolated, but these guys, every fucking practice would isolate my vocals. I was like, I'm not doing it anymore.
That did not start
the man
to
who
mess with
literally talks and can't get enough of hearing himself didn't want to hear himself.
So Dave and I have both fronted bands purely from a vocal standpoint at one point or another, and this is the other funny one. Alex, we're 2 years in, and Alex has always told us that his ex-wife told him that he just couldn't sing.
Yeah, she actually told me my dog threw up because of me.
Be honest, she didn't like my vocals at the time, did she?
So
I don't know that she commented on you.
So we're like 2.5 years in. We've spent all of this time. We spent about a year and a half looking for vocalists.
I feel like it was longer than that.
It was.
We're getting to a spot where we're getting frustrated because we're not out playing shows. We've got 12 songs. Musically, we're putting them all together, but we don't have vocals. So
we're so tight and just spinning our wheels here.
So after this last vocalist that we really had high hopes for, we spent a lot of time with, and it was clear that wasn't going to work. We really said, look, this is too much time. We know we've done vocals before. We just need to grab our balls and do this. So we just kind of knuckled down and started.
It would have been better if you grabbed your own, though.
Right.
Well, yours are softer, and they feel better in my hand.
A handful, yeah. All right.
So,
smaller, less of a strain on the fingers.
Very much so.
So at the end of the day, that's where we went, and I think we all kind of look back now and realize, it was far better that it worked out this way. And the other thing, and we talked about this for a long time, but the three of us really have a tight bond. Like when I say I'm sitting next to my two best friends, I really am. Yeah. And so to realize, we always talked about, this is going to be really challenging for a fourth person to come in here, to be a musical fit and
break
to
the
connect
circle
with us. Is going to be really hard. So it just never worked, and this just ended up being a really good thing for us.
I'll say that the time that really, for me, felt like validation, which I usually don't look for in other people. I try to avoid that, but I couldn't avoid it at this point. It just made me feel good to hear it. One of the people that we had try out on vocals that honestly we liked the best, I think we had him come back 3 times, was Owen from Horror Heist.
Okay.
Had tried out for us a couple times. We played a show with them at the Milestone, and it was the first time that he had seen us since we had shit-canned Rose and started doing our own things. And he came up to me after that show, and he was like, I don't know why you guys were ever looking for a vocalist. He was like, you guys just have a dynamic. There's no reason for you to do that. And I felt like that was probably the best validation for me coming from him to say, yeah, I could have done this, but you guys, what the hell do you need me for?
Yeah.
I took that to heart. I really appreciated him saying that. But we had a lot of people that we really did like a lot that, and we almost went with, like Owen was one of them. Leighton Underwood tried out. We really liked Leighton.
Yeah.
We thought, in terms of this guy, we like him enough to where he could hang with us and just kind of break this circle. But it just wasn't quite the style we wanted. And that was the only reason that didn't work. And I think maybe didn't we choose somebody else at the time? And then that got spectacularly torpedoed.
I mean,
it was all a fucking train wreck trying to find a singer. It really was.
We had a guy call Alex from New York on Craigslist, and he said he's going to come down, and he name dropped a whole bunch of stuff that was really impressive for us.
Then he did come down.
And
he came. I think
tried
he said
out.
he basically moved here almost for us. It was the weirdest thing.
We were like, "What? No." And then the really
Hey,
funny
can I stay in your
part was-
basement?
He came for the one.
Yes, that happened. That happened.
Like he came, and he had put a whole bunch of lyrics together with stuff. He did his homework. He came. He had stuff.
Except miraculously, none of it fit rhythmically with anything that we
quite
did.
fit. But I get a call like it was either 3 weeks or a month later, and he's like, I need to get back to New York. Can you give me some money?
He hit me up right after Alex told him no.
What?
He's like, it's your fault I'm here. Give me money for bus fare. I'm like, I didn't ask you for shit.
He tried to guilt us into it too, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was like, I came down from New York for you. We were
Exactly.
like, dude, we met you at the studio once, and we've talked online for like maybe 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Again, we met a lot of lovely people, a lot of people that we genuinely loved. It just wasn't a good musical fit. But yeah, there were a couple other folk. Tony Yahoo
Yahoo wasn't so bad. It just
he wasn't. He just we had this guy. He was so I'm 45. We're not young chickens, but this guy, he had 10, 15 years on all of us. We're all in that same age range. Alex is the young one. But he came in and he held onto a coffee mug the whole time that he played, and he like the whole time he was there for like 2 hours, and I think he sang for a grand total like 45 seconds.
And he sounded like Dave Brockie, which maybe wouldn't be a bad thing under a different circumstance. That was the vocal tonality I got from him, was not like the roar of Odorous, but like the sort of almost Homer Simpson-y sounding kind of thing that Dave Brockie would do. It's what he sounded like. But the thing that got me is, we were very specific. We were looking for a vocalist, not another guitar player. We're not looking for somebody to replace me on bass.
Don't come here
and the thing is,
guitar.
I was worried that Zig might get a little bit touchy about somebody showing, and dude walks in the damn room with a guitar. And I'm like, fuck, this guy is going to try to like shoehorn himself in to try to play guitar and then maybe sing some.
This was the rudest I've ever seen.
So this was in my head that he's trying to shoehorn himself into something else. And the guy gave me a compliment, and I really should have taken it that way. And for something, my brain was totally oriented a different direction. He comes over to me after we played a couple of songs. He's, dude, you're really making me want to buy a bass and learn how to play. And I said, no, you can't. Nope. And the thing that was is in my head, I was thinking, I want to play bass for you guys. But what he was actually saying, the way this translated to him was, I think I want to go on my own, buy that instrument, and learn how to play it. And I said, no, fuck you, you cannot. And it just, they were like, Dave, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I didn't want him to shoehorn, man.
I remember our last day with Rose in our conversation. We really liked her, and it was clear that we were going in different directions.
Yeah.
And she did not see the future we saw. And Ziggy is probably the most patient person. I know we discussed for days how we were going to go into this conversation.
Oh, it got intricate.
And let her down nicely. And, we really did respect her as a musician. She was a very good musician.
She was actually better musician than any of us,
really.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
One thing that was kind of always on Ziggy's nerve was she would bring an instrument and just start playing.
Yeah.
And it's like, but you're here, we need you to dedicate yourself to the vocals.
Yeah.
Because, she didn't come from a punk background, hardcore background. So she did have trouble keeping up with some of the pacing and fitting the lyrics in where they needed to fit. And she came to that last day and she brought a guitar case with her.
We knew. Yeah, so there was this kid that I grew up with, and you couldn't even have a conversation with him because he'd just be playing a guitar all the time, and he wasn't paying attention. He was just, and I knew a lot of people that were like that. So, and it would get on my nerves. Like, look, that's fine, play guitar. I play guitar too, but like if we're going to be having a conversation, let's focus on the conversation.
Like if you've ever watched Metalocalypse and Squiscar is always doodling on a guitar, that was Rose.
Yeah. Well, we were so ready to let her down easy and have it be a nice conversation, and she took the guitar out, and he was just like, get the fuck out. It was like, we were like, whoa, 3 days of planning out the window.
Yeah. It was funny to watch that switch get flipped. Although,
no,
he did that at first, and then she kind of got taken aback, and she was like, this is about what I said to you the other day about your song's not being good enough to be on an album, is it? And I was like, no, well, actually, yes. And we were all kind of taken aback by the whole thing. And Zig's like, I'm really sorry about this, and I hate that we made you drive all this way for like 5 minutes of getting fired. Can I give you a hug? No, fuck you, and just takes off. Yeah. Like unfriended us all on social media. It was just bad.
All things being equal, I still like it. No ill will there at all. But the one place that I did have it, like everybody has their kryptonite someplace. And the kid that brought his wife, that was kryptonite.
Well, that was fun. His wife was Olga, and she was hot, and I actually hit on her in front of him because he pissed me off so bad. I was like, I'm just going to do this because you're an asshole.
I have to tell the one story that you alluded to earlier, and then we can move on. So he again, we're kind of exchanging information back online. Again, he's coming down here to audition for vocals. So he shows up, and I only know him from Craigslist, and I meet him out on the street, and it's 8 o'clock at night, and 2 people get out of the truck, and I'm not expecting this.
Yeah.
And my first thing is like, am I about to get robbed?
We're having them to your house. It's not like we're at Noda Studios anymore.
This is my home. He and his wife get out, and he introduces her, and I'm like, no clarification, nothing ahead of time about like, hey, I'm going to bring my wife with me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, this is weird. So we come in the house, and I've got about 45 minutes to kill, I think, that night before you two showed up. Mm-hmm. So we're standing in my kitchen. I offer him a drink, and we're sitting there just trying to, get to know each other. And within like 45 seconds, he produces this sheet. Now, again, remember, I come from a punk rock background, and I want things to be raw and natural, and I played, fucking power chords at 200 beats a minute. And, there's nothing that I do that's extraordinary technical or anything else. I just want it to be raw.
Yeah.
And he produces a piece of paper that had his 12-point checklist on what it took to write a good song. And he had prepared this along with a dossier that he had for how he was going to become a famous musician. I'd never seen anything like this before. And so he hands me the paper, and I start reading through it, and it is literally a checklist of the things that I think make the most like if you were to say to me, what is the worst band you want to be in, or the worst criteria for a song, here it is. And I just I'm looking at this. So I handed the paper back to him, and I said this is awesome for you.
I
said,
cell phones, you should have.
Yeah,
you don't have a copy.
You don't have a copy.
I regretted so much. I told these guys afterwards. I'm like, I can't.
The irony is this guy gets in the room with us and grabs a microphone. And this motherfucker could not carry a tune in a wheelbarrow.
He was
it was
toned
awful.
So we record pretty much everything that happens in this room. Everything's all mic'd up here in all our rehearsals. We record everything. So I had the whole thing recorded. So first of all, his wife grabs this stool and she's sitting in the corner. And I swear to God, I'm looking over at her while we're playing. And I swear, she's embarrassed for him. I don't know if she's never heard him sing before, because the video that he sent me with him playing guitar, he wasn't bad, but it's bad. So we go through, and he keeps trying stuff, and that's fine. And I'm always curious at the end of the day, because look, I've auditioned for bands where I've sucked, and I know I can do better than that. And you're nervous or whatever, so I make that accommodation for people. Yeah. And so afterwards, what I'm always curious about is okay, so is your response that wasn't very good? Maybe I could do better, or is your response, yeah, I think that was pretty awesome? His response is, I think that went super well. I'm super excited about this. I thought his performance was great. So I take the recording and I send it to him, thinking maybe he'll listen to it and there will be a further reflection.
He did more while I was here. I don't know if you noticed this part, but we had, I obviously didn't have vocals for Flenser because we were still looking for vocals at the time, but that bridge is a little weird for what we do. And he hears us play that, and he comes over to me, and he's like, that sounds really interesting. Teach me how to play that. I was like, no, I'm not teaching you that riff. What the fuck, man? Figure it out.
Anyway, we sent him the recording, and he came back and he said, I think this is awesome. I'm so excited to come back. And we kind of had to say, like, okay, thanks, but no thanks. And then it was about 6 months later, it was like 6 or 9 months, and I get a random email, and he says, I have a new band. Can I come over to your place and record the band? And I was like, it's not really a commercial studio that we have here or anything. But it was the checklist. It was the checklist of, song must not repeat, bars in a certain order, and there has to be a certain it was just this like mathematical formula that he thought he could apply to stuff, and I just thought this is so against everything I think about music and why I like music. Like, clearly, we're just not a match.
It did get to a point where you had to take turns firing people. It was like, all right, who gets to be hated next? Because even the ones that we try to be, like, nice about, it was like, fuck you, unfriended on Facebook.
It was like, if you brought them in, you had to let them down. And listen, for anyone out there listening to this that thinks we are full of egos, we spent damn near 3 years trying to find somebody because we didn't think we could do it personally.
Yeah.
And it really did come down to us realizing we are meant to be a three-piece. I didn't even know I could sing until I think I was in the car with Ziggy and I was singing to a Bad Religion song, and he's like, "What the fuck was that,
dude?"
And I don't even sing around people because I just had it in my head I couldn't do it. That's what I was told.
Wrong.
It turns out we are able to fill that void ourselves. Yeah. And it works out so much better because we know where we want the song to go.
And you guys do a pretty good job of harmonizing too, so that's something we don't do. But
I mean, he I didn't hear it until he did some on the album. Like, these two got together, and after I had done my vocal passes, these two's come in, and it's like, there were some things where it wasn't perfect, of course, because he's just started singing, but where he nailed it is like, who the fuck is that? It's like, it's Alex. What? I thought you couldn't sing. And he absolutely can. I'm honestly looking forward to see where that goes in the future. Like, what else can you do?
Shout out to Brandon Hamby, who took the record and really put it together. So we recorded all the tracks here, but mixing is not in our forte. So we reached out to Brandon and see if he would work with us. Love Brandon to death. Oh, yeah, after we sat and we listened, especially on the title will come to me in a second. Hearing some of the vocals was kind of a wow moment for me. Some of those harmonies, because when we're in here in the room, we're not able to do all of that stuff quite the same way. And there's not much on the record that we couldn't do live. But
there's nothing on the record we can't do live. In fact, that was a weird thing to me. Is we would be doing stuff on the recordings, and then Alex would add something, or there'd be a harmony that's thrown in there, and we'd hear it. Sounds good on the album. And then it made its way into the practice room. So really, to me, there's nothing on that album that's a harmonizing situation that we can't do live. And really, and it was weird to me how the two start to inform each other. Yeah. Like, we'd be playing it, and even like, 2 weeks before we were done, and we're like, okay, here you go. I actually went up to Dead Peasants and hung out with Brandon. There were a couple of places where I wasn't happy with some harmonies that I did. Yeah. And I was like, I did that dickhead move. I was like, I'm going to throw some harmonies on this shit. If you guys don't like it, you can veto it. But I just had a couple ideas. And
we kept everything.
And literally it's still stuff that we can just do and has already translated into the practice room.
After hearing that, for me, that was kind of an eye-opener. And as we start talking about a second record, I think a big focus for me is going to be to create even more space for those kind of vocals. Because after we heard a couple things, after they came together on the record, there was... it was, again, for me, it was kind of a wow moment of like, not only does this sound great, but I want to do more of this.
Yeah, and I think it kind of sets you guys apart a little bit from all the other bands in the scene.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I know that when I heard that chorus on The Run, And as we had been playing it live, it had always been a two-part harmony between me and Zig. And then Alex threw in a third part to it, and I heard it, and I was like, that's us. Holy shit. That sounds really good. And it kind of blew my mind. And now, of course, he's throwing in that third part while we're playing in here, and it's there. Like I said, the two inform each other, but it was one of those things. This is something that I've been trying to do for a long ass time. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I haven't been able to get it together because I haven't found the right people, basically. Mm-hmm. And it just never materialized. It's like, yay, I'm 46. I finally fucking did it with my best buds. And I have a heart attack next week. But no, I just for that to, I guess the way it came out, I was pretty pleased with it to the extent that hell, for your first shot, that sounds pretty fucking good. I was pretty proud that we did they did a lot of the recordings, and I sat back like on my couch there and going, yes, that sounds good. And no, that doesn't sound good. But yeah. They're the brains behind all that, but
it does, and it sounds really good. And I think like the vocal harmonies, that kind of thing, that's what gives me the like feeling of like the Sword a little bit, or maybe Red Fang a little bit at times. So like that metal side, but again, like Red Fang, I think is one of those bands that also has some punk rock sensibilities to them. So it's that kind of feel that I get from it a little bit.
Which is funny. I have like one Red Fang album. And no Sword albums.
But I think you do sometimes realize, because Van Huskins at one point, we talked about maybe getting another guitar player. Eric's idea was always for it to be a three-piece, but we talked about it. Mm-hmm. And also, I think we may have talked about doing a singer, but ultimately it was just like, we did one show with another guitar player, and that was just one of those Halloween shows. We got Josh Featherstone to play with us on Super Chuck, and we did Super Chuck.
I can't imagine
no disrespect to Josh, because he's a great guitarist, and he did a great job. But I honestly think we could have done it ourselves.
Right.
And ultimately, it's just like, why would we add another element to it that's going to throw
Now I'm sad that I wasn't there, because Superchunk was another big influence for me growing up. But I can't imagine you guys is a regular four-piece. I mean, again, the way it's the same thing. You guys just have a recipe that works so well for what you're doing. Yeah, it would seem to do anything else to taint that.
I can't see anybody adding anything to it.
And the only reason we did it was because we had, it was like, Superchunk has two guitars, and there were some things Eric couldn't do live and everything. So, but Josh came in and didn't really do a lot of that stuff. He kind of played rhythm, which Eric wanted to play lead. And no offense, because we only practiced a couple of times. It was like we threw it together, but we should have just done it ourselves. Ultimately, we still play a couple of those songs. We play them by ourselves.
How long has that Halloween show at the Milestone been going on for?
It was going on it wasn't going on back when I was in the scene the first time, but it started sometime probably around, I'd say maybe 2010 or so.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that when Dysplacer was playing, I became aware of that Halloween show, and I had really wanted to do that. And when we all came together, I remember telling these guys, even in the first couple of weeks we were all playing, that one of the things I aspired to was being able to get a billing on that Halloween show doing something. And, it took some time.
And then we did it, and I had a cold.
But that was... I must have... I can't remember why I couldn't make it to that one, but I was not at that one.
Yeah.
It was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
I'd like to do it again when I don't have a cold, and when more people can see it, I think, because... I feel just the feedback we got was that people really liked it.
Yeah.
And it was fun. I wouldn't mind doing it. It was like Misfits minus a piece, because they're four-piece with Glenn singing by himself. Made for some great jokes, like Glenn and Jerry's ice cream, because I was being Glenn Danzig and Jerry only wrapped up in one person playing bass and singing. Talking about suing myself 3 times in the prior week to get into the role of being both of them. Made for some great comedy, which we try to do a little bit of, and again, it's hit or miss, but it's like 1 part stand-up comic to 3 parts music for the whole thing, I guess.
That was like one of your bucket list items too. You wanted to play that show.
It was fun, but we got put on at 1 a.m.
It was fun for us. We did it 4 years, and we're already talking about doing it again, whether it's this year or next year. We're already talking about who we want. I think we might do CCR this time.
Oh, that'd be nice.
But we started off. We did the Pixies. That was a lot of fun. Then we did Danzig the next year. Then Superchunk, and then last year we did Screeching Weasel.
Oh,
which we all love Screeching Weasel.
Did you guys play the weekend before we did? Was that why I missed that?
No, we played. This was a couple of years ago. This was not the year you guys played.
I would have loved to see you guys do Screeching Weasel.
But it was that was the one that made us not want to do it again, just because as much as we love those songs, they really weren't that much fun to play and sing. They were really hard to play and sing.
Well, that was the one time these guys have told me no, is I wanted to do Melvin's next time we did it. Yeah. And they told me no.
Well, I wanted to play Honey Bucket, and I got a resounding no from both of them. They're like, we can't do that. I'm like, yes, we can. Well, maybe.
I think most of that, to be fair, is like I'm the only one that's really familiar with it out of the three of us. And granted, we'd be learning like 4 songs instead of the 10 songs that we had to learn to fill out a set for the Misfits. It'd be a lot. We'd have to start working on it way early. And
this is yet again a testament to Alex's capability, but also his work ethic. So I grew up, in those early days when I was discovering punk, and I couldn't find material, and I'd end up with like 3 or 4 cassettes, and you just listen to them over and over and over again. Misfits Collection was one of them, and I remember like that shit's just drilled into my head. Like it just, there's a million years could go by and I'll still remember all of it. And I think same thing for Dave.
Yeah, I got into it later, and it did get definitely just permanently burnt in there.
When we were prepping for that show, I mean, Alex had, obviously played in hardcore scene and has done a ton of stuff, but Misfits wasn't something in particular that he was intimately familiar with. So Dave and I just kind of picked stuff up, and it was fairly easy for us. But Alex, what amazed me was the amount of time that Alex was able to, because the way that the drums are played in the Misfits stuff is really important to the feel for those songs. Yeah. And, we made him our own a little bit, but
at the same time, he was a really bad fucking drummer. just like some of this stuff, like
not me, by the way.
Yeah. No, not Alex. It's like I'd listen to Jerry. I have this real love-hate relationship with the Misfits anyway, because they had some. They could write a catchy tune. They really could, but in terms of like being able to record something that sounded good, or actual execution of that, like what song was that? Was that it was Hybrid Moments. We're listening to it, and I'm listening to the actual rhythm of the bass line. And I'm like, was Jerry only fucking drunk? What the hell is going on here? That's not even contiguous.
I never noticed, but as we started to listen to the structure, I started to listen to that stuff and say, they fucked up in the studio and they got like the number of measures wrong, because there's all kinds of weird random shit in there that doesn't really line up. But we figured all that out, and Alex not only lined all that stuff up, but he emulated the drum parts, which were so central to that. And when we got up on stage and played it live, it came off, I thought, so well. But again, I mean, Alex put in a lot of work to be able to do that.
Glenn would say about those extra measures that he meant to do that.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
It was very weird because, my punk background was Face to Face and Pennywise and Bad Religion, and you got Agnostic Front and stuff in there for the hardcore punk side, and the Misfits really weren't on my radar. And when they brought it up, I was like, I'm familiar with like Dig Up Our Bones, and they were like, blah!
He starts in with Michael Graves there, and I was like, fuck no.
But that's really all I knew of it. And then they're like, well, here's the 10 or 11 songs you want to play, and I start listening. I'm like, was it just the singer and drummer playing and there was no instruments? Because the drums follow the vocals and make no sense. If you actually try and play that stuff and be true to it, it's a mess.
Yeah, it was absolutely a mess.
It's a total mess.
We kind of joked that it was going to be, and again, I don't say this with an ego about us being great musicians, but we kind of joked that those recordings are so bad that it was difficult for us to make them sound
to emulate them properly.
Right.
Yes. It's like people trying to emulate Kurt Cobain on guitar. Get back to the Nirvana thing. It's like he had his own way of sucking. That if you're trying to emulate it, there aren't really a whole lot of people I've encountered that can do it to sound exactly like he did, because of how sloppy he was, the way he did it. It's like if you're trying to emulate somebody that's that bad, it's not easy. And again, I did make the mention. I was like, this is probably going to sound better, as bad as it is, than any of their live shows ever did. And somebody was like, not Madison Square Garden. I was like, okay, you got me. Now, with like $1 million backing them up, there's no way we're sounding as good. But yeah, back then, then again, he was writing and recording some of that stuff on an electric piano before they had guitars coming in. That was interesting.
That was a lot of fun.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. Dressing up like douchebags was fun. I still have those pants. I threatened to wear them to his wedding. They were
I don't know if this is a thing or not, or if I misinterpreted this, but because the show that we played didn't have the same sort of twist that I thought it was going to have. So the first one of those Halloween shows that I had gone to was the Seduction doing Metallica.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I still Seduction, one of my favorite bands ever, and just fantastic to see live. Again, that whole like putting on a show thing, and you go home and you're like, you should have seen what I saw last night.
They were great.
But they did it, and they were all wearing wigs, and they kind of there was a little bit of a mockery in the midst of playing homage to all that stuff. So when we did it, the idea was to we were going to do either the Mist Shits or the Mass Fats
or the fit-ins, something like that.
So the fit-ins is what
which
we
is a lot
ended
like
up
the
doing.
fill-ins, but still.
So we all tried to do, geeky, preppy, but then do the makeup. We had somebody come over to the house and help us do the Misfits skull makeup and all the rest of that.
And I will never do a devil lock again as long as I live. It was a pain in the ass. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I went over. I had like the cornflower blue sweatered vest with like the brown and salmon herringbone polo shirt.
It was all about the pants, dude.
Those pants were
golf pants.
White, burgundy, and green. Like patterned golf pants. They're comfy, man. But they're super comfy. I threatened to wear them to his wedding, and I probably should have, in hindsight. But yeah, I still got them. They might come out again at some point. I might just start wearing them to our shows. Then fuck it, I'll wear my hideous golf pants.
Something went wrong. We're not quite the Misfits. We're like the fit-ins.
Or Misfits, maybe? I don't know.
Misfits, yeah, that was another one. By the way, thank you for all for sticking around so late. This has been a fantastic night. Thank you, Milestone, for putting on another incredible Halloween show. You all might know a few words.
We might.
Feel free to sing along. There's ample area on the dance floor for you to do your thing.
Yes, go, go.
That was another one of those things when I came here and I went to the Milestone. It was kind of like slipping into an old pair of blue jeans or something from places that I grew up in Los Angeles. Like, I'd been to a couple other clubs here at the time. There's so many places that have closed down. Tremont, I think, was one of the places that I had gone a few times. But I walked into the Milestone. It was just like I felt right at home instantly, and just absolutely loved that place. And wanted to do everything I could to try and help make sure that place sticks around for another 45 years. But I one of the things I say here, so like Dysplacer used to play Zoe's Coffee up in Gastonia, which was great, but it's hard to get your inner badass on, like standing on a 1 foot stage in a coffee shop that's well lit with books over in the corner. Let's go back to this line that Jared came up with, which is he was gonna get on stage and encourage people to throw books. I just like the chaos of that in a coffee shop. But yeah, playing the Milestone is just I love walking into that place. You can feel the history there, but it's also really easy to just get in the headspace to put on a show when you get there.
Yeah, I don't think I'm alone. I think you guys are probably in the same place. It's been almost a year since we've played live, like in front of people, and I miss it. I really want to get back out.
We're all dying.
Yeah.
Really want to get back out in front of people and play.
I do too, but I'm still not there yet.
No,
I get it. Yeah,
I say that all the time. Like, oh man, I'd love to play a show. Well, I could play Freeman's this weekend if I wanted to.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
I could set up a show at Freeman's on the weekend. Not this. I couldn't call him up and be, hey, I want to play this weekend. But I'm just not ready yet.
We got invited to play a couple, and one of them I almost said yes to because I assumed it was outside. And because it was in Raleigh and very short notice, we said no. But then I saw the pictures of the show the next day because it was from it was indoors, and I'm like, fuck, I'm glad we didn't say yes.
Yeah.
Because I think that was July, something like that. I mean, yeah, I'm dying for it. I feel like I'm not interesting as such as it is unless I'm on a mic with a bass in my hand.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I'm so proud of the record and happy that we finished it. But by the same token, it's almost anticlimactic that we can't go have like a record release party or go out and do a couple of shows to promote it and share it with folks. And so, I feel like it makes it harder to get it out there and make people aware of it.
I know a lot of people were like, There's a few bands I've talked to that said that they don't want to release anything right now, just because who's going to pay attention to it? You can't play a show to celebrate it. But we went ahead and released ours. And I'm really glad that a lot of bands have, because it's given. I think it's given a little bit of a chance for people to pay attention to it more.
I've been surprised with the response we've gotten to it.
Yeah,
I have, like, looking at, I don't know if you guys do this, you kind of obsessively go over to Spotify and say, what are my monthly listeners now? Yeah. And it actually turned out to be more than I thought it would.
It's all because of the record cover, though.
It could be. The record cover, yeah, we were going to talk about that. The record cover, I wanted to go along with something, with Oopsie and Something Went Wrong. And like my first idea was like, let's just get like a board and a nail, and Alex trying to drive the nail in with a dildo. And these two were like, we want to show this album cover to our kids. Right. I was like, all right. And then we came up with the idea of us like sitting on a couch in like white boxers and white tank tees with cups of Kool-Aid, like Jim Jones style. And I can't remember why maybe people wouldn't get that because they weren't old enough to.
That was the whole Hail Bob deal.
Well,
yeah.
So I have to set up part of the, and this is a good segue from the like really wanting to play shows and get out there. So Dave has been really eager to get this record. I mean, we all wanted this record done, but I think Dave has it just is the most driven to kind of get this record out. So Brandon had sent over the last mixes. We knew we were good, and then we just needed the album artwork so we could get it submitted and start getting it out. So I've this last couple of years I've been doing some studio photography and been kind of developing a passion and interest in that. And so eventually we landed on this idea of pouring the bleach in the eye. So we start talking about how we're going to photograph this. And I'm trying to think about how I need to set up strobe lights and everything to kind of get the, this water hitting Dave in the face. But we're talking about getting the bleach bottle. We're going to buy a bottle of bleach, empty it, because we don't really want to actually pour bleach into somebody's eye.
Obviously not.
Right. and then, I start thinking to myself, well, we can't do like Clorox or whatever. We'll get sued. We can't use somebody else's product on the page. So Dave buys a bottle of generic bleach and we let it dry out. And we had a night planned to come photograph here, and we're going to do it in the garage. We're going to let the bottle dry out. And at the last moment, I'm thinking to myself, like, there's still got to be bleach residue.
No, we actually had a different idea that was going to be a lot more complex. We were going to get some plastic tubing, like some surgical tubing or something like that was capped off on the end.
Yeah.
So the only water in there was actually in the plastic tubing and never touched the inside of the bottle. Mm-hmm. But Zig was, he's very conscientious about potential dangers, and he was like, "Look, I don't want you to go blind." I was like, "Yeah, I don't want me to go blind either."
I'm a big researcher, so I'm going and I'm looking at these Google articles that are basically saying that even if we pour bleach in a bottle that's dried out, that even the smallest amount of bleach brings with it the potential of permanent blindness. Right? Yeah. So I read like 2 or 3 articles. So I say to Dave, I'm like, you know what? Let's not do this tonight. I'm going to order just a clean food grade bottle on Amazon so that we can, take the shot properly. And Dave's like, well, that's going to mean we have to wait another couple days. And I'm like, Dave,
it was a week, man.
Permanent blindness. Like, what part of permanent blindness do you,
I was ready to do it.
Yeah. So,
permanent maiming for your art. Go.
I remember, so then I said to Dave, so I didn't know how many takes it was going to take to get that shot. And the reality is, and I kind of prepped Dave, I'm like, so tonight you're not a musician, tonight you're a model, and you basically need to be prepared to pour water into your own face. And I've never taken a photograph like this before, and I have no idea, So I'm like, we could be here for a while. We've got a kiddie pool blown up in the garage. Dave's standing there in, a pair of, swim trunks and a t-shirt.
I just had jeans and a t-shirt on. I wasn't worried about it. But then we got it right on the first one. And I was like, that's good. Let's not do it anymore. Like, no, we need to take more takes.
We're like, no, you're going to get wet, Dave. We're not wasting all this time.
And by the third one, I'm like, fuck you. I don't want to do this anymore.
I have a couple of these shots of Dave just wholesale, just a giant jug of water being poured in his face. They're awesome. Yeah. So that was, it was fun. But we got so lucky that first shot was really just perfect and worked out that way.
It's kind of like going to the studio when you nail it that first time, but then you're like, well, let's go to again to see if we can do it better. You're not going to do it better.
Yeah. No. But it was serendipity to get that shot, and I'm proud of the record, but I'm proud of the the photo side of the album cover and just how good that came out.
Should have been somebody else's face.
I was getting ready to say, did you volunteer to do that?
I tried to get Alex to do it, and it was something along the lines of, well, Alex is too short, and the camera won't line up or something. I'm like, bullshit! Every other excuse of Alex is too short fits, except for that one, because you
It
could
just
adjust
doesn't
that
look
shit.
as good with me in the picture. That's what it is.
Well,
Bullshit.
this kind of goes back to what we said at the beginning about Dave really kind of being the face for the band. I think in more ways than one. When
the fuck that happened, I don't
when we started, and there's some songs that I've written, there's some songs that Dave's written, there's some songs that we've worked collaboratively on, and there's a great mix of stuff in there. But as we were going through and working through vocals, I mean, there's some stuff that I hear a vocal rhythm in my head that's different than what I'm playing, and that I have a really, really hard time with. So as we worked through after we had decided to become a 3-piece and just do our own vocals, I think it just naturally worked out that Dave had more ideas for stuff, and for Dave, he was able to make stuff flow, and so he ended up taking, the lion's share of the vocals. Mm-hmm. And then I think, when it comes to the stage show, obviously, there's banter, back and forth too, and we kind of share those duties. But then Dave is the one that's out. He's out at the clubs more than we are, talking to people and, and interacting with folks and, helping to set up shows and really kind of, driving that. Dave's on Facebook, posting, when there's stuff going on. And so from that standpoint, Dave has really taken on a lot of that duty of being the person that people talk to and being the thing that people see and being the voice that people hear. And that's
probably why we're not so well known.
Give yourself credit.
Mm-hmm.
I know when we did Jerk Store, I put Ben on the cover of it, like just in a little poster on the wall of the store. And Ben's like, "Why'd you put me on the cover?" Like, because I have a picture of you giving a middle finger to an alligator. And he's like, "Yeah, but still, like, are people going to think that I've got an ego and that I want to be on the cover?" I'm like, "Dude, no. Like, I just chose you to put that because that picture worked."
That was kind of the point of that one. It's like, how much ego can you have when it looks like you're dropping bleach into your eye and grimacing about it and like not looking your best anyway? It's like not really exactly an ego surge there. So I just I do kind of want to start making them be guinea pigs more, I guess, going forward with stuff like that.
We'll see.
I felt kind of like the little dude in Basketball. Like if you've seen Basketball with Trey, when he's like sitting there in the fruit costume or whatever, and looks like a complete goober, and he's sort of doing it for their benefit.
We talked about just band photos in general, how there'll be the picture and there's the two of them, and you see the top of my head.
Yeah,
I'm not even in the photo.
For those of you that don't know, Dave and I are both over 6 feet, and Alex is
5'4" on a good day.
Yeah. Which some people have fun with photoshopping.
Yeah,
it gets interesting. Brian.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It had to be Brian Altman.
Yeah. Brian is usually your culprit with that. It's funny because I was his victim for the longest fucking time, and then he got a hold of a couple pictures of Alex, and it was over. He hadn't.
Yep. Immediately to the elves. Immediately.
And I'm damning myself here because he'll listen to this and be like, "Oh, gotta fuck with Dave some more now." And it's gonna happen. I'll be his victim once more.
I was getting ready to say he doesn't fuck with me, but I'm expecting that any time now, so it's probably coming.
It might. I think with him, it's one of those things where. He comes across as a little bit more outgoing and cavalier than he actually is. And if he hasn't done that to you, he's probably worried about how you'll receive it. Would be my, like, is he going to get mad
trust
at me?
me, Brian's got no worries about me.
Yeah.
me and Brian are pretty good.
Yeah.
So.
But that's usually why he won't do that. So.
Yeah. I'm glad to be part of a scene and a group of bands that are really just very welcoming.
Yeah. I love that about our scene.
Yeah. It's just very refreshing to have everyone be so supportive of everyone else and so willing to put someone on a show and, move things around to accommodate, everyone else. And yeah, it's just very nice.
I stand against
got. I think you're working on what, 3 or 4 right now. I know we've got one that's finished, and I meant to mention this anyway. A few people know it's one that I was working on the riffage, and I had recorded it. And the first person to hear it, and the only person to hear it up until the point where he died was Brett Butler. And after he died, which fucked me up. I mean, I don't want to make too big a thing about this, but he and I had bonded pretty tightly.
Yeah.
And I actually ran it by the members of Flight Risks. I was like, I'd been working on a song, and he was really the only one who had heard it. I kind of want to dedicate this partially to him, but also to my parents, because my parents have both died. My dad before I got together with these guys, my mom during, and I haven't been able to really bring me to write that song.
Yeah.
And Brett kind of pushed me into that when he got murdered. And, I asked them for their blessing. They said, yeah, so we do have one that is about that. It doesn't mention it by name, but that I would be lying if I said COVID didn't influence that to some degree, because, it's really about, the first verse, the initial impact of loss, the second verse kind of accepting it, and the third verse moving on, which I had to bullshit because I don't know how to do that. But, there's that one. I've got, and it usually is me writing the lyrics. I find myself, and people can call it privilege, and that's fine. It doesn't bother me for them to do that. But I find myself personally removed from a lot of shit when it comes to the really clashy parts of politics. Like, people get mad about it, and I'm like, well, I'm not really behind any of these people. So I can kind of sit back and look at it. And when we write about something politically, it's never about one group.
Yeah.
It's never about one person. It's never about something that's going to date it. In fact, when somebody asks me, who are your lyrics about? Yes. I'm guilty of some of the things that I write about.
When we got together, one of the things that I said to these guys was I wanted to try to avoid politics because that's going to polarize people no matter what. And we're in a small scene. And if you're trying, my goal was to try and build a following again. I said earlier that Tiff was kind of a role model for me to a certain degree in terms of that putting on a show, and Seduction was another one of those things. And, just again, seeing that energy that came off the stage. If we, especially in today's day and age with the size of our audiences here in a place like Charlotte, if we start to get into politics, again, we're just going to alienate somebody. And the reality is that I believe that one of the problems in this world is that we don't come together enough to talk about things. People believe different things for different reasons, different life experiences, different whatever. Yeah. And it's not for me to judge somebody else for what they believe. We can disagree on how to solve certain problems, but that doesn't necessarily make me right and them wrong, or vice versa. So I think a lot of the lyrical content, and Dave is largely responsible for this, is an exploration of the way that third parties influence the way that we think, or the way that the media sort of portrays things, and how that keeps people from coming together, and how there's there's always a direction that somebody else wants us to think, or wants to drive us. And there's a lot of those kinds of themes, I think, for us. Like
he says, we don't want our lyrics to divide people. I'm like, okay, so I'll write lyrics about that division.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Literally, the lyrics of Musings. I think it's a little weird how it came out, but it was almost like something that mixed. It was almost like modern day partisan tribalism compared to what antebellum white gentry said to poor blacks and poor whites to keep them separated, and sort of comparing and contrasting the two. Like those three little kind of haunting and sad harmonized pieces in there. At least you're not them. They're nothing like you. Those are the things that those people said to poor whites and recently freed slaves to keep them apart. And it's sort of a comparison to how we're done today. We
have these conversations a lot about how we all just talk past each other now. It's become a spot where we can't, we're that division just seems to grow, and that's not going to help anything. That just puts us all in a worse position.
And I think of a lot of the lyrical content that I'm sort of moving towards, I've got some concepts in my head. I'm looking more to write things about how selective people are. I've already got songs about cognitive dissonance and bias confirmation with media and things like that. Those things are pretty rampant in our society. But and again, I'm not calling anybody out in particular. I don't do that. Again, we're all guilty of it. I've been guilty of it before. There is not a single person on this planet that hasn't been looking for an answer for something. They go on a Google search and they stop when they find the answer that they agree with. Everybody fucking does it. But now it's almost like I want to start addressing that selective hearing and selective blindness. Like, look at these people that, COVID's a hoax. Yeah, I know this person that died over there. And I don't get in these arguments on Facebook like I used to because it's just fruitless, but I still see them. And one of the things I saw recently that just absolutely blew my fucking mind, like the fact that somebody would have the audacity to do this. Somebody was talking about COVID on their page, and somebody follows up with, "It's all a hoax." Guy says, "No, my aunt died from it in the hospital, and we couldn't go see her because of it." And this person responded with, "Well, I'm sorry, but you're wrong about how your aunt died. You've been deceived." And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, really.
So, and there's all this data out there that you can look at, and it's, it doesn't have to be politicized. It's right there. You can see that it's not necessarily, well, I'm not even going to say necessarily. It's not a fucking hoax. We know it's not. And for somebody to not only go into saying it's a hoax, but to tell somebody that you are wrong about how your loved one died, you have been lied to, is astounding to
wrong,
me.
But we're in like Holocaust denial territory, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And so those kind of blinders are probably areas I'm going to go into, or like the fact that, a lot of our politics seems to be about people hating other people and being made to feel good about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. And, I've got a song in my head for that, so there'll be, I don't want to say it's more of the same. It's going to be along a similar vein as a lot of the stuff I've written before, but there's definitely going to be some COVID/isolation impact to it. I can guarantee that.
Yeah. Damn. I was listening to your lyrics on the way over here, and I knew that they were kind of deep, but I, wasn't trying to read any meanings into it. And I'm thinking, man, Van Huskins, we just write songs about girls or cars.
And there's not a fucking thing wrong with that.
Well, and look, we've got some of that too. I Fell in Love with an Alien is about my fiance who is an alien to the United States. Yeah. She's from India. So yeah, I mean, we it's not exclusively that we live in this kind of in that spectrum,
right?
But I would say that's a big theme, and it's a lot of what we talk about personally. The time that we're not spending playing, we're often talking about these kind of issues that we see in the world, and again, for me, the central theme for all of us is I think we would all like to see people come together. That division doesn't benefit anybody but the people who are in power. And it doesn't benefit any of the rest of us. And again, like everybody has different perspectives for a reason. And obviously, you have crackpots in the extremes of any group, or you can find idiots or assholes in any group. But that, unfortunately, I think so often what happens is that we malign an entire group of people because of the extremists. And this isn't unique to us or this time in history. This is what human beings have done for thousands of years. But it's unfortunate. It seems that we have so much human potential that isn't utilized or is wasted because of these kind of, we're more interested in just screaming at each other and talking past each other and pointing fingers.
Yeah.
Well, like, the kind of breakdown section of Out of Focus, I don't think it intended for it to be that way when we first wrote it, but when we added the two separate news mediums speaking at the same time, one in your left ear, one in your right ear, if you're listening in headphones, you can't make anything out, but it's just kind of how things are right now. You just hear all this noise, and neither thing coming into your left or right ear is necessarily true. It's what they want you to hear. And the reality is it's so out of focus.
Kind of how I wanted to wrap up was, so you've got this new album. It's called Oopsie.
Yep.
You guys recorded everything here.
Yep.
And then sent it off to Brandon. We've already kind of talked about that.
Yep.
Brandon Hamby mixed it. But you can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, pretty much everywhere you stream music. Probably.
Yeah, I don't think it's on SoundCloud. Is it on SoundCloud?
Probably not.
Or Bandcamp? Yeah, I don't think it's on.
I think it.
Oh, is it?
No, it's.
I had to take a look.
You'd have to actually put it on Bandcamp. It doesn't get distributed there through whatever.
I think we just did the major stuff.
I mean, I would suggest doing that, setting it up for whatever. You'll get a few people that want to buy it, and it won't equate to much, but it's something. And I always suggest people just go, if you want to buy it on Bandcamp. But speaking of buying it, are there any plans for a physical release, or is this just going to be? Because I know a lot of people feel differently about physical releases these days.
So I go back to, and we've talked a little bit about this. I can't It's very far and few between. Like we've seen a couple touring bands come through town that have physical CDs, but like I have to, put it through the lens of my usage. So I've gone and I've bought CDs from a bunch of bands, and I really do it to support them because I know what they're going through. We go, go through the same thing. But then if I'm honest, the CD generally, and I'll listen to it, but it gets stuck in my CD player, or the jewel case ends up in my door card of my car or whatever.
Yeah.
And I 98%, 99% of all of my listening is really on Spotify. So we've seen plenty of other bands. Anti-Queens is the one that comes to mind that come into town, and then it's just a little 4-color poster card that they give you, and then you pay like a couple dollars and you download the songs off someplace else. It seems to me like that's where the majority is. I think if we are out playing shows and there's enough requests that that we'll go through and justify that. But in my mind, the way that I consume stuff, and I think the way I see other people consume stuff, I think having other kind of merchandise, T-shirts and stickers and that stuff tends to get more. People be more willing to spend money there because, again, I think things like Spotify or Pandora or whatever just make the rest of the accessibility so easy.
It does.
And we've put more money into playing than we'll ever get back out of it. I have no intention of trying to make money doing any of this. So I think, we would like the T-shirts, we try and recoup the cost because that's a couple bucks for those. But like the stickers we'll end up giving away. And, I'm more interested in trying to share the love and get people exposed to it than I am trying to make any money off of what we do. So for me, it'll be, a physical album will be based on kind of requests that we get. Yeah.
Well, I know there's still people that like I still buy CDs. I still buy records. Of course, records. If you can do records, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that. I like to ask that question because some people don't. I mean, because there aren't that many people that buy them, and like you said, a lot of people that buy them are going to buy it just to support, and then the CD is going to go in the backseat of the car
That's
or in a drawer or whatever.
I'll be honest.
But I'll buy them and I'll listen to them. But and I'll listen to it once or twice on CD, and then I'll probably listen to it on Spotify the rest of the time.
I'll stream the
But
shit.
I'm a collector to begin with, so I want a collection of physical media.
Surrender your soul. Surrender time.
I just feel like so much of the history of the scene is already forgotten about, or that people that are playing here these days. Like I said, there's a lot of people I look around and I see, Johnny Dick, he was around back then. Mike Benson didn't live here, but he was up here for part of that time with 134. And, so I see a lot of the same people, but then I also see a lot of people that didn't live here back then. And they don't really know what happened back in the mid-90s in the Milestone, or even before that, but, back when I was active. And I was like, I don't want any of this stuff to get forgotten about. Not my band, not the other bands. So part of it was like, I just want to document the history and tell the stories. And then that way it's out there for future generations, for anybody that cares about it.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely know. Like, I know one that just like smacked me in the mouth. I was listening to the Negulators episode that you did.
Yeah.
And I knew like that those guys are pretty storied in this scene, but I didn't know quite the extent of it.
Well, that's the same.
Yeah, you're right about that.
I knew those guys from Kudzu Ganja. We played with Kudzu Ganja way back in the day, and I'd heard that they had toured with NoFX and blah blah blah, but I didn't know the whole story. And so from that to me, my very first episode, I was like, "This is fucking awesome!" I get all kinds of great history in this.
The funny thing is, I was mad at Kudzu Ganja for a couple of years for no fucking reason. And it was because that band Entropy that I was in high school was supposed to play a show at the Milestone. It was like an all-day show, and it was like Wicked Ways, Seducer, a bunch of those other guys from back then. I'm trying to think of who else was in that scene back then. But it was Shannon that was supposed to be handling the booking. And he told us, hey, we've got this slot. And we were like 15, 16. We were so fucking thrilled to be playing the Milestone. And suddenly find out we're not on that bill. Well, who got the last slot? It was Kudzu Ganja. Well, fuck those guys, We're all mad about it. And, like, I went in while they were playing, just like he was saying, stood there with my arms crossed, like, fuck you guys, glaring at them. Like they gave a shit about some 16-year-old kid doing that. But then later, I talked to Penny about it, and she was like, your boy dropped the ball. I asked him to confirm. He never got back to me, so I gave him the slots. It was not their fault at all. Yeah. It was, much love, Shannon, but that was your fault.
Twice.
And then I went and saw them later in Noda, and I was like, damn, these guys are really good. And then to hang out with them later as the Negulators, like I saw them play at Freeman's Pub, and I was just like, holy fuck, these guys are great. And then we all got drunk and played foosball at Tommy's and bonded and shit, and now we've played shows together and good friends. And
Jared started to go out to see shows with Jared, and he brought me to the Milestone the first time. I was, had that moment of like, I can't wait until I get to play here. So when you and I met and we started playing, I thought to myself, because you told me you hadn't played the Milestone until we did.
Not till we did. Nope, never got the chance.
So like I brought Dave, we're going to the Milestone. I know you've been there a million times, but like, I'm thinking like, well, Dave's played here a million times already. Nope. And then, so I thought how awesome that we all got to do that
Chop
together.
Shop, let's see, we played Kate's skating rink back in the day. Let's see, I played Klondike in Boone, which was actually a pretty big deal. Not a big deal, but
somebody
it was
told me
one of
there
those
used to be a
place.
place.
It was.
I think Greg Philbeck told me there used to be a place just a block down from the Milestone. There was another club, or
there was a place like right across the street. It was like the Church of
Church.
Yeah.
So I forget exactly what it was called, but that was where Gigi Allen played.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So a couple of venues that you might look at and think, oh, those are a bigger deal than the Milestone. But the Milestone was always where I wanted to play, and I got denied that one fucking time. Had I stayed in Damage Done, I probably would have played there a bunch of times. But I bailed on that just because, like I said, personality conflicts happen. No,
Church of Musical Awareness. That's what that place is called.
Church of Musical Awareness.
And it was the building was still there when I started going to the Milestone, and that was right around the whole time that the Gigi Allen thing happened. And but I never went there. This has been a Gabba Gabba Hunt media production.
See, I always looked at Kiss like I saw the pictures before I ever heard the music. So I'm looking at Kiss, and I remember, this around the same time I'm seeing Emmett Otter and The Nightmare and all this shit. So I'm looking at Kiss and how hardcore all their shit is with like the fire breathing and the blood shit with Gene Simmons. And I'm thinking that Kiss is going to be something that makes Black Sabbath sound like yacht rock. And then I hear it and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then like, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park comes out and I was just kind of done. I always had this expectation Mostly because of Gene Simmons, that this was going to be like the hardest shit I've ever
I hear that
encountered.
quite a bit. That assessment of it. But I don't know. When I was a kid, I heard the music, I saw the makeup. It was like a comic book come to life for me. I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
this is yeah.
I could
this.
definitely get it. I mean, I have a friend that's like gonzo over them, and I found when I used to do repossessions, the one thing